All right, board members, it's 6 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and call this meeting of the Granville County Board of Education to order. We do have a quorum. I want to welcome everybody for our first in-person board meeting in quite a while. And so thank you for coming tonight. We want to begin tonight with our invocation by Dr. Hayes.
Heavenly Father, in our hearts, plan our prayers that you bring our faith. We pray for your guidance to keep your counsel and see the Lord. We have faith to sad and sick here to be good. We also ask that you extend your hand protection over all who are intended to speak English, that our actions in this meeting reflect our vision for the right.
Thank you, Dr. McKnight. Before we have a pledge, I'd like to take a point of privilege for just a moment. We have recently, in the past weekend, had a commissioner that's sitting pass away. We also had another sitting commissioner pass away in July, Mr. Owen Roberts, and then this past weekend was Mr. Edward Smoke. Out of respect for the board that we work closely with for the good of children, I'd like to take just a moment of silence to remember them. Thank you for that. Mr. Yu, you're prepared to lead us for our pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that. So first up tonight on our agenda is our recognitions of staff. And so Dr.
We're delighted to be able to recognize a very important group who's been assisting us quite a bit since March, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Stan Whitworth.
Thank you, Dr. McLean. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, tonight, please join me in recognizing our talented team, the Technology Department. This small group of people take on critically important work in our district on an enormous scale. If nothing else, COVID has shined a light on just how interdependent our work in education is with these digital resources. We are very grateful for their hard work and expertise, and as it shows tonight in this meeting as well. So I'd like to read the names of the entire team, and then at the end, we could all show our appreciation. Our director, Gwen Lofton. Russ Pegram. Sarah Adcock, Sherry Valentine, Eric Beltran, Tommy Cyphers, Cynthia Hester, Kevin Lawler, Wayman Oxendine, Leah Powell, and Huon Topping. Let's all give them a huge round of applause. Technology team, we're sorry that you couldn't walk the red carpet tonight, but know that you're doing it virtually in our minds, so thank you. And we do have some certificates for each of you that you'll receive after this meeting. Thank you, Dr. McLean. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Winmore. Madam Superintendent, do we have changes to our agenda tonight from you?
No, sir, Mr. Chair, there are no changes at this time.
Board members, anything from you? All right. First up on our agenda is our consent items. We've had time to look through those. We have a new boiler system contract for Snowball Shaw, our 21st Century Grant contract, our interview and universal screener tool for elementary and middle schools, and Elevate K-12. Are there any questions regarding those consent items?
Yeah, I'd like to know a little bit more about Elevate.
Mr. Perry, would you speak to that, please?
Certainly. Good evening, members of the board. Elevate K-12 is a virtual online instruction program that we're using to
fill the vacancies for math and science positions at Northern Granville Middle School. Hopefully buttress the middle school and South Granville High School. There's a certified instructor providing virtual instruction including a substitute. We will use this to the end of the semester while continuously recruiting for actual teachers to be in that classroom on a daily basis once we turn back into full session. So this is something to help assist us as we help with our vacancies.
You don't mind. So what you're saying is that how that will be used in virtual
Math and science.
okay, who will do that?
So these are certified instructors that are provided by this company, and they take their daily recruit.
Oh, and then once we're there, then we'll try to.
Yes.
Okay, that helps.
Any further questions about our consent items tonight? All right, if the board is ready, we would entertain a motion concerning our consent items. So moved. Have a motion by Dr. Houlihan. Do we have a second? Second. By Mr. Peace. Is there any further discussion? All right, if you're ready to vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Board members, I want to remind you to make sure you're speaking into your microphones because this is being live streamed, so we just want to make sure that everyone's hearing that. Next up is our approval of our minutes. In your agenda packet, you have minutes for our special board meeting for July 13th. And when the board is ready, we'll entertain a motion for those minutes. I'll make a motion to approve. All right, we have a motion by Dr. Houlihan. Do we have a second to approve the minutes as presented? By Ms. Allred. We have a motion by Dr. Houlihan, second by Ms. Allred. Is there any further discussion? All right, hearing none, if you're ready to vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Thank you. Now we come to the time of public comment, Madam Superintendent.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Stan Winborn. We have several guests from our community who have decided to join us this evening. Dr. Winborn, will you take it from here, please?
Yes, ma'am. So this evening, we do have 5 members of the public who have signed up for public comment, and I would note that each person has a maximum of 5 minutes to speak. I will give the individual speaking a notice when we're at the 4-minute mark, and again when time is up. And we have a maximum of 30 minutes allowed per board policy for public comment. Our first speaker tonight is Ms. Kathy Watkins. Ms. Watkins, if you'll approach the podium, we will receive your comments. Your address is listed as 3604 Brassfield Road, Creedmoor, and the topic is school closing. And when you are ready, I will start the timer. And I'll give you a heads up at about 4 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. It came to my attention that there was going around that it's a possibility that one of the southern end schools are closing or discussing to be closed. And it's my understanding that it's between Wilkins and Creedmoor Elementary. It may be just rumors, but I would like to know what is the criteria to go by to close a school. Is it numbers? Is it scores? Is it just, because we're at the southern end, and I'm married to a farmer. We have farmland. None of these farmers are selling their land to build land. And years ago, it was told to us that the lines would be redrawn. Well, they haven't been redrawn. And yes, we're the lowest number in the county. We have 261 students. 83 of those students are school of choice, which speaks volumes because they come from out of county and they come from Oxford just to come to our school. I just would like to know what's the criteria to close a school. What are you looking for? Do I need to go out and publicize, come and bring your kids, or, because I've been in Wilkins for 11 years, that was my first school, and I would hate to see it close.
Thank you. Typically, we do not, board members do not provide responses during this time, but we will follow up.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Thank you, Ms. Watkins. The next person that is signed up for public comment is Sherry Wilkins. And her address, Ms. Wilkins, if you'd like to come forward, please, to the podium. Address is listed as 3219 Tunbridge Hills Road, Stem, North Carolina, and the topic is also school closing. So Ms. Wilkins, when you're ready, I'll start the timer.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. I am also coming to you to talk to you about the closing of Wilton Elementary. I have been there for 20 years, almost as long as the building, it seems like. I'm a part of the fixture, it almost seems. And I am very, very upset at the even mention of closing your highest performing school in the county. We work our tails off for these students that come to us, no matter what, whether it's socioeconomic, whether they're the highest or the lowest. We give them everything we've got. I cannot believe that as the county wants a building, that would be a reason to think about closing the school. I say shame on those people. We should be looking after the social, the emotional well-being of our students, and when you're talking about closing their school and relocating them to where they don't know and they don't know these teachers, I don't think that that's looking after our students. I would ask that you look at this again. You look at your schools that are your highest performing instead of a building. That you look at your students instead of a building and do what we need to do for our students.
Thank you, Ms. Wilkins. The next person that has signed up for public comment is Ms. Lori Saunders. Ms. Saunders, if you would like to approach the podium. Your address is listed as 1504 Bluebell Lane, Wake Forest, North Carolina, I believe. And the topic is virtual school. So when you're ready, Ms. Saunders, I'll start with you.
Thank you. I would just like to say that it's difficult to get here at this time for working parents. So I think the few people that we have here are certainly not representative of everyone that's concerned with virtual learning. Last year, I have two girls that are at Holly. Last year, one of them was honor roll, and the other was very close to that. This year, they're failing every subject. I've had very little communication with teachers. Last Friday, it came to my attention that there were some issues, and we started looking into it, and one of my daughters said, "Oh yeah, I've only been to my typing class one time because I can't get on." So I said, "Well, you know, you should have told me." She said, "Well, I did tell you." And then she told me she got on, and then she was not back on again, so I didn't realize it had gone on for that long. Never was she counted absent in 3.5 weeks of not showing up to class. Never were we alerted. So we got with the principal, and we got with her teacher, and we got that worked out. But they don't care. My kids don't care. They feel like the teachers aren't bothering to show up, so nobody's taking this seriously. They're not taking it seriously. They're also very, very involved in sports. They want to get back and play basketball. And I would just like to say that at this point, we have seen Youngsville Academy, we've seen Bailey's Academy, we've seen lots of private and charter schools go back to school safely. So it's no longer a question of can we go back to school safely. The question is, when are we starting? We're ready. This is failing our children, and there's no reason. It's been proven. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Saunders. The next person who has signed up for public comment is Danielle Hayes of Franklinton, North Carolina. Ms. Hayes, if you would approach the podium, please. And the topic listed is back to in-person learning. Ms. Hayes, when you're ready, I'll start the time.
Thank you. I'm not going to waste a bunch of time with platitudes. Parents, students, and teachers, we are all trying our best right now, but we are not okay. Have you experienced virtual learning? Have you sat in a home with a Granville County family struggling to make this work? Have you witnessed the meltdowns of both students, parents, and educators? What about all the families forced to juggle remote learning with multiple children in different grades at different schools and younger siblings as well. The fights and frustrations of not understanding the multiple learning platforms of Google Classroom and Haiku and Canvas being used in the same household and sometimes even by the same student for different classes. Have you witnessed the parents' confusion in understanding the day's agenda or helping with advanced lessons or internet disruptions or technology failures? What about the educators teaching from MacBooks, attempting to guide, help students that are all attempting to learn from Chromebooks, where lessons and web pages all look completely different? Teachers are not supposed to work twice as hard to make half the difference with the same pay, while also facing the possibility of a job loss. And many of our wonderful Granville County teachers are doing all of this while simultaneously facing the same struggles as the rest of us with their own children. Was this all part of Plan A? Excuse me. Do you think of the consequences that virtual learning would bring? We feel held hostage in our own homes by our own laptop screens. My high schooler has 4 meetings a day between 9 and 3, whereas my 4th grader starts at 8:30 and is usually done by 1:30. In my household, we have 2 students on 2 totally different schedules in 2 different schools with 8 different subjects, 7 different teachers, 2 different schedules, 2 different communication applications, 1 seriously tired mom, and a lot of frustration. Please help me understand why all families are expected to be flexible with virtual learning, yet the board has not offered the flexibility to go back to school to in-person learning. Please stop telling us that you understand. It doesn't feel like we're all in this together. When your decisions don't cause your family to have a loss of income like mine, or your depression and anxiety in your normally healthy and outgoing children, or increased child care costs, or when you have to watch your children lose their love of learning just a little more each day. Children belong in school, together, every day. Virtual learning was supposed to be an option to families that felt unsafe for entering schools. And as this remains an option, why is live, in-person education still not an option for everyone else? I could go on and on about the science and the numbers. I could tell you how currently COVID-19 is affecting less than 1% of the general population of Granville County, or how there's still not one single documented case of a child transmitting COVID-19 to anyone in the entire world. But it has become increasingly clear that the science doesn't matter. Please put any agendas aside. Let our families and our doctors decide what is best for our health, and do your job, which is what is best for Granville County Public Schools. And in those final decision-making moments, if you are on the fence, just remember, after all of this, if you truly believe that all children in Granville County Public Schools are getting the same education virtually as they would in person, you may need to rethink your position on this board. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes. The final person who has signed up for public comment tonight is Wayne Edwards. Mr. Edwards, if you'd like to approach the podium, please, sir. Address is listed as 2202 Tar River Road, Creedmoor, North Carolina, and the topic is Superintendent's Evaluation Matrix. When you're ready, sir, I'll begin the timer.
Good evening, dear members of the board and Superintendent McLean. I sent this email earlier this morning so you'd be aware of what I would be speaking about. Thank you for your service to our local community and commitment to our local public education system. We could discuss many accomplishments by our local education body, which includes all of you, but I only have 5 minutes to speak tonight, so I will take this time to discuss one obstacle I have noticed with our current system. Listed on GCPS's website is a list of the duties of the board, which is found on the NCSBA website. Part of the duties of the board is to periodically evaluate the superintendent and conduct a scheduled formal annual evaluation. After speaking with Board Chairman Richardson, it is my understanding that part of the measurable metrics of evaluating our superintendent is to measure the increase in end-of-grade scores, also known as the OGs. I would like to challenge the board to further evaluate this measuring metric for the unprecedented time we're currently operating in because of COVID-19. The pressure on the superintendent to increase the EOG scores puts pressure on the principals, which puts pressure on the teachers, which puts pressure on the students. During normal circumstances, this is a pressure cooker. And during this unprecedented time, this is a pressure cooker without any liquid. I have 2 children that are enrolled in our local public education system. One of them attends Harley Middle School. My daughter is required to log on to her computer no later than 8:40 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. for her school day. In addition to this extensive computer time, she averages 2 to 4 hours of homework daily. This was the typical regimen for her 6th and 7th grade academic years, and it was very difficult. Having this homework regimen on top of online learning from 8:40 to 3:30, in my opinion, was not effective. Statistics show that adults' maximum online learning capacity is less than 250 minutes per day with multiple breaks. How can we expect these kids to do more than what adults can? How can we expect these kids to increase EOG scores during this online learning time frame? Why is the traditional school current online curriculum so different from Granville Academy? These are questions I ask you to discuss in your private session. Real life example. Harley Math curriculum uses the augmented curriculum at times. One homework assignment is 10 questions. With the 10 questions are codes within blocks of questions. The first block is questions 1 through 3. The second block 4 through 6. The third 7 through 9. And the final block is question number 10. You must finish block 1 in order to get to the second block. If you are incorrect, you are redirected to the beginning of the block to figure out which question is wrong. Kids can spend hours on this one assignment. It's not timed out. So after 8:40 to 3:30 daily online classes, hours of homework, Dad gets home. Dinner's served, then it's time for Dad to help with math homework. Thankfully, my daughter gets blocks 1 and 2, but unfortunately she's stuck on block 3. Well, guess what? Dad's stuck on block 3 as well. So I emailed the teacher at 8:30 p.m. and guess what? The teacher immediately returns my email. Why is the teacher monitoring her email at 8:30 p.m.? Because of the pressure by the board requiring EOGs to flow downhill all the way to the students. This example sheds light on why teachers are leaving our county, why students are applying at charter schools, why students are enrolling in private schools, and why students are moving to homeschooling. The sad reality is, the kids that will be left in public school system will be the kids that have no other choice. And unfortunately, a lot of the kids that bring the overall county grade down will remain in the public school system, while the board continues to push good students to other avenues for their education. In summary, I believe the board of directors is the problem of this obstacle. However, I believe the board of directors is the solution to this obstacle.
1 minute, sir.
Together, as long as we continue to work and put forth 100% effort, we can achieve more together. We can be a great place for public education. God bless all of you, and God bless Granville County Public Schools.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, that concludes public comment for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Winborn. Now time for our superintendent's report. Dr. McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Mr. Chair, our board members, guests, staff, and listening audience. I would like this evening to make a special announcement and congratulate our Granville County Public Schools Early College High School for being named one of the best by U.S. News and World Report for the 6th year in a row. This announcement is hot off the press, and we thought no better way than to share share it this evening. The measurement comes for college readiness and math and reading. We congratulate the principal, Jackie Harris, her students, and staff. We're also delighted this evening to report that more MiFis have been ordered and are coming. We were delighted to see that more were needed and have found a way to make that happen. But in addition to this, please allow me to begin tonight by extending sincere appreciation to all who have executed various roles in assisting with our start to this year. Yes, it was definitely different for all of us in ways we've never seen before. It has certainly been one for the books, and superintendents all over the state continue to repeat that messaging. I, for one, know that all of us appreciate the necessary partnerships and measures taken in these never before seen times. I have been fortunate to hear some of the most incredible stories throughout our communities and schools, but we've also heard some of the most challenging stories and want you to know we will continue to do all that we need to meet the challenges head on with the care and concern they deserve. This has not been easy, but we are all working to make it better. I would like to thank our parents and guardians, our grandparents, those big brothers and sisters, the neighbors, and more during this time. In our region, the majority of the schools started the year on Plan C, but like us, several are considering a calculated transition to Plan B at some point with measures for, around, and about safety remaining at the helm. As such, during tonight's meeting, staff will share factual data with our board for consideration as promised, because we are at the 4-week mark. It will also address measures for continuing to support families as best we can with technology during this remote status. Mentioning such, allow me to pause and thank our many educators for the work you've been investing in our students the last 3 weeks. Yes, that too has been very different. But we promised our community and our families improved service from this spring. And while many of you invested a great deal of time and effort this past spring in attacking this pandemic head on and the delivery of service quite well, you have all availed yourselves in ways I know have pushed levels of creativity and collaboration like never before. Who has seen days like this? And the answer is no one. So thank you. Thank you for the innovative effort to locate and serve our community's most precious gifts, our children. While in this remote state, we have experienced waters untread and are still navigating new paths every day as new information comes available, like many across our state and nation. So allow me to also thank our entire community for their efforts as well. No matter how great or small, please know it all matters. I just wish there was something more our district could also do about Zoom or about the lack of broadband in our community. So what I will do is take time to thank the many neighbors, churches, businesses, child care facilities, and organizations that have stepped up and opened up your resources to our students while we continue to learn more about and receive guidance about COVID-19, better best practices regarding instruction, and the impact all of this has had on our communities, our children, our families, our schools, and our funding. Yes, we are continuing to monitor it all daily. We will also continue expanding our literacy efforts beyond our school building walls, and for the first time, are pleased to announce a fall book bus that is scheduled to begin next week, September 21st to be exact. This fall's book bus is being combined with our child nutrition efforts, and instead of just one bus, we will now have two buses running, one in the northern end and the other in our southern end of our county, to more frequently serve our families. So I urge everyone to come out and take advantage. Granville County Public Schools is continuing to emphasize the importance of reading this year and are asking all students K-12 to read 20 minutes a day, and we hope everyone takes advantage of our book bus efforts to build his or her home libraries this fall. We're doing this in partnership with Scholastic. Child nutrition is open at all schools daily for curbside service, and we are still delivering to our medically fragile students as well. We have 7 remote sites. So if you need breakfast and or lunch, please report to your child's school and make certain no child goes hungry. Finally tonight, we are excited about our combined efforts between technology and our parent liaison designed to assist parents with technology while we are in this status for our students. Yes, the many platforms are challenging. Yes, we've been trying to roll out devices as swiftly as possible because, like you've seen on the news with many districts, there has been this hold on devices coming in. So we have made amends, and we've gotten through 2nd grade and are heading to 1st grade distribution. And we are hoping that our technology team is able to get our backup devices out to our lower grades as soon as possible next week. We're also prioritizing those MiFi distributions. Everyone is hard at work, and we're just encouraging our entire community to keep in touch with us. We want to hear from you. That is the only way we can make our best even better. Just know everyone is continuing to try, but we want to hear your concerns. We will do our very best to meet your needs. This Thursday is a professional development day, meaning no school for students. Students should please use Thursday to refine their outstanding assignments if necessary, and there will be no attendance. Please touch base with your child's teacher immediately. Last this evening, I would like to thank Tar River Elementary for hosting tonight's meeting, and I understand Mrs. Peggy Carroll sponsored the flowers that are being used on the tables for tonight's arrangement. Mr. Chair, this concludes our report.
Thank you, Dr. McLean. Board members, do you have questions for the superintendent? All right. So next we'll move to the chair's report and board member reports. I want to say thank you for everyone taking the time to either attend our meeting in person or by live stream. I know there's a couple of topics on tonight's agenda that are of particular interest to many of you. It is important to note that in addition to the public comments that we have heard tonight, we have received quite a few calls, emails, and conversations with the public, and want you to know that we have taken your feedback seriously. Thank you for reaching out to the board and the administration. Tonight, in a few minutes, we will hear presentations related to where we are in regards to reentry. It is important to know that everyone's voice is equally important. The most important information is the safety of our students, staff, and the community. I would like to remind our board members, as well as the public, that it's important to listen tonight with an open mind, to seek to understand the different vantage points of the conversation. I want nothing more to see our students back in the classroom, learning face-to-face with our incredible educators. However, as we have said before, since the beginning, that this will be done safely for the students and staff of Granville County Public Schools. In addition to reentry, we will also continue our discussion around the conversation of consolidation. There has been some misinformation that has circulated publicly. We have not come here tonight for this meeting to close a particular school or to target a student body in consolidation. We have come to this point tonight to make a decision on how we are to proceed in studying the topic about the possible closure of a southern elementary school, and then how to proceed in our study of the topic of the possible renovation of Holly Middle School. In whatever decision is made here tonight to proceed, please know that there's a legal process in which we must follow. And one of the biggest pieces of that process is to receive public input. Just as I stated before, we are looking to do what is best for children of the county so that we may provide the very best educational opportunities possible. A week ago, I informed our board and the public that we are extending the deadline to accept candidates for the vacancy that will occur with Mr. Renfre's resignation of his District 3 seat. This extension is planned to be extended through the end of this month, and interested candidates can find additional information on our district website. I would encourage our citizens to assist the education of our children by filling the gap with this need. The work is not easy. It is long, and it takes a considerable amount of effort, but it is rewarding to be a small part of the education of what I believe is the brightest that North Carolina has to offer. One additional topic I'd like to address publicly that is not on our agenda tonight. Over the last several weeks, we have heard from our public, especially our veterans, about the American flag not being displayed on some of our properties. I want you to hear me very clearly in this. There has been no political statement intended to be made by this oversight. Also, hear when I say that once the issue was brought to the attention of our administration, they worked to ensure that we have had plans in place to have our flag prominently and properly displayed across our district. And they have also asked that they have backup plans and backup plans to the backup plan to make sure that to help with this matter. Our board, our superintendent, and our district value the sacrifice of those who fought for our freedom, and as such, we will continue to follow the policies instituted to promote such in our district. I would ask the public, if you happen to see a flag not being displayed, to please reach out to central office or the school office and give us time to determine what is going on and how to correct the issue. Unnecessary banner on social media and in the press distracts the staff and the public from our main mission to empower every student every day to reach excellence and achievement for all. In closing, I want to say thank you. Thank you to our administrators, the teachers, and the other faculty that have worked tirelessly in a new environment to help us educate our students during this pandemic. I want to thank parents who I know are struggling with family and work responsibilities while juggling their child's education. I want to thank our students. I believe out of all of us, they have taken a lot of these changes in stride and have sought to do their very best. In a video a few weeks ago, I encouraged grace. Along with grace comes accountability. I would encourage our educators and students to do their very best and to strive for excellence, even in this time of pandemic. It is my hope tonight that when we close out this meeting, that we will all left here learning something new. We have sought to understand those who hold a different viewpoint than us, and that when decisions are made, we are able to look at the goal of excellence and achievement for all as we empower every student every day. Board members, do you have any reports tonight? Mr. Rivers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank all the people who spoke in public comments tonight. As the chair said, it is important that we do hear your feedback. And thank you very much for excellent comments. As the chair mentioned, I announced on June 29th my intention to resign from the board effective September 30th. Unfortunately, we did not get any applicants to fill the position by September 30th. So in conversations with the Vice Chair, Mr. Udi, and the Chair, Mr. Richardson, last week, I've decided to, for the time being, to delay my planned date of retirement on a monthly basis to either December 31st or whenever we do select a replacement, whichever occurs first. So as soon as we're able to select a replacement, then the chair and I will figure out the best day for me to go ahead and make my final day effective. I do want to let you all know that, so you will be seeing me after September
30th. And hopefully that'll be a good motivation for other people to volunteer and step up. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Rivers. One point of clarification, speaking with the attorney today, Mr. Rivers' seat does have to be vacated before we can officially vote for a replacement. So as we go through that process and interview candidates, that will be a discussion as we get a little closer to that point. So again, I'd like to remind the public that we are soliciting resumes, applications for that position through the end of the month. And so hopefully we'll have some of the Commissioner 3 be able to step up and handle that. Yes,
Does
Dr.
that
Williams?
mean, would you kind of, I heard that before, but it's really not clear now. So, once we have a candidate that we want to vote on, we can't vote on that candidate until the person has left?
Yes, sir. The seat has to be vacated before we vote.
Well, I was thinking about Mr. Smith's seat, but that was a situation where he'd already left. No, it didn't make, okay.
For the last two vacancies, the person had vacated immediately. And so when it came time to choose a candidate, that seat was already vacated.
Great, thank you.
And if I can clarify something, the reason that I've decided to delay this is I do not want to leave District 3 without representation at this very critical time, and I don't want to leave the board shorthanded. We're facing some very difficult decisions, as we all know, and so I'd like to have there be a transition without a big gap. So that's basically what I'm trying to do.
Board members, any further reports, anything from our subcommittees that's not on the agenda? Mr. Needy?
I wanted to ask about the letter that was mailed.
Yes, sir. Yes, there was a change to the letter. We had a board member express concern about it being from the full board because there was not a vote. So there was a change to that letter that it came directly from the superintendent and I, and then the letter was sent at that point.
Okay, so the content at the end of the letter was changed.
Say that part again, I'm sorry.
The content at the end of the letter was changed.
The content that was changed in the letter was the first two sentences that's expressed to it came from.
Well, I felt like not having the consensus of the board that this letter should not have been sent. And I also felt like the content that was proposed for our board to use the racial card to get a point across. And I think what it is this board is the one that's and I just feel like it's wrong, not a consensus of the board in the letter, and I don't feel like it's right.
Mr. Chair? Yes, Mr. Reese?
Based on that fact of what I understand, several members of the board will disagree. And based on my opinion, based on the fact that when the majority of the board agrees with something, whether we vote on it or not, I don't see how two members could keep it from
Can you lean a little closer to the mic so you have the
I just don't see how two members of several member board can stop a letter from going forward. Maybe that's a question for the lawyer. I just feel like if you say there's a consensus on the board, that means every board member agrees. And then you have this, and it's specifically one part of the content. I feel like everybody in our hands. And that's not a question.
Was later in the letter, did it say a consensus of the board?
I don't recall. That's what
Because the part that I'm familiar with is the beginning. It stated it was sent on behalf of the board, and that's what was changed.
So you're saying behalf of the board is not everything.
Well, we did not state, it did not state that it was on behalf of the board. It was on behalf of the superintendent.
Well, if I'd have known that's the way it was gonna be, then I would have never given you the authority to speak on our behalf. I would have said the only thing was being signed. So I disagree with the process that's not.
Any other comments or questions regarding that? All right, we'll move forward. First up in our policy section is 9.01, the technology update. And so, Madam Superintendent.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This evening, I'm delighted to present to you Mrs. Gwen Lofton, our Director of Instructional Technology. We have some new developments. Ms. Lofton?
She will be right in there across the hall, so it's a little delay. I'm texting her.
Can we move on into that?
Yes. Enrollment numbers. While we're waiting on her, Dr. Margaret, can you? Here she is.
Madam Superintendent, our technology team is telling me that it is a little difficult to hear board members, so you have to put the microphone very close to your mouth to be able to be heard on the live stream.
Thank you, Dr. Granville. Good evening, Ms. Lofton.
Good evening. Hello, everyone. Just wanted to give a quick update on behalf of the technology department to let you know what we've been up to lately. So if you want to go ahead and navigate, you can skip to the first topic, which is where we are with devices. So go ahead and go to the next slide. All of our now second grade through 12th grade students have a device. We were able to prioritize for first and second grade just giving devices to students who don't have one at home, as opposed to what we traditionally do when it's any student who needs a device can have one. So we were able to stretch our devices a little bit more that way. We did receive a partial shipment for the touchscreen Chromebooks that are new for our K-2 students, so we're relieved to have that. We're still waiting on the rest of the shipment. In the meantime, we're making a plan for how to get devices into the hands of our kindergartners and their remaining first graders. So we'll see what progress we can make in that regard, but we understand the urgency, as many teachers and students need these devices in the hands of these kids. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, I think. So with MiFis, we were able to give out over 200 MiFis at this time. As I think I heard Dr. McLean say earlier, we have ordered some more, and they are coming. I also learned today that with the collaboration of NC Student Connect, we have at least another 100 more that are coming with grant funds, which is fabulous. So we'll be getting those out as quickly as we can. As you can see on the slide, we had over 650 households, not students, households, apply for those MiFi devices. So we were overwhelmed by that, and so we're working to try and get the MiFi or hotspots into the hands of these kids. We have implemented Wi-Fi rangers. You might have seen school buses parked in different locations. Up here you can see the 4 locations where they're currently at. This is where within 100 feet of the bus we're broadcasting Wi-Fi for the community to use. And we're also looking at, thank you, that's great, you guys. We're also looking at in churches perhaps using some of the same technology strategically placed around the district so that students can get Wi-Fi from one of those locations. You can see the town of STEM has graciously opened up their network 24/7, so I posted those credentials so that they would be accessible. And then, as I mentioned, I am working with someone from the Assistant County Manager of Granville County. She's working to create a map that she'll distribute to those in the county that shows where Wi-Fi is available. And I could see that being very helpful. So I'm excited that's a collaborative effort where families will be able to look and see if they don't have internet access on home at their house, where's the closest location that they can get it. And then the very last thing I'll share is we are partnering with Keon Furnace to offer some technology training. It's going to be at the Oxford Housing Authority. And the topics are what we most frequently field questions about. So it'll be things like Zoom, Google Classroom, Power School Learning. And so it'll be offered 2 nights coming up September 16th and 17th. We'll have it recorded and posted for those who can't attend in person. But we're trying to help those in the community feel more comfortable with being in Plan C and just trying to make the best of the situation. So I think that's the last slide. Yep. Any questions that I can field on behalf of the technology department?
Mr. Rivers,
Yes,
can you please lean up just so they can hear you?
on the buses that go to the 4 locations, do we have any feedback on how many students are taking advantage of that? Do we have big crowds out there, or not many, or do you have any feel for that?
Do you know much about that scan in terms of what you're hearing from facilities and the buses? I know our departments are kind of collaborating. Actually, who sees it the most are the bus drivers who go and charge up the buses so that the battery can continue to run.
Yes, I know that the Butner area location, the Oxford Housing Authority, have had some traffic. And that was also the case when we piloted this back in the spring as well.
Yeah, those 4 locations, we piloted it, I think it ended up being 8 maybe in the spring, and we found these to be the most popular. But I still realize it's not ideal, right? Because you're still having to like work outside or in your car or things like that. But it's a economical way to try and make a difference in the community, but I realize it's not an ideal working situation.
And the reason I'm asking is, I agree, is having actually tried to do that in the past, it is not at all easy to be sitting in your car, balancing your Chromebook or your computer on your lap.
Right.
So I'm wondering, is there any possibility that rather than being outside in the car or whatever, like the Oxford Housing Authority, is there a room where you properly distance and let people be inside at desks? Or is there a church with a large enough fellowship hall? Or is there some way that we could make it a little bit easier on the students than sitting in the car? And it's going to be non-ideal for parents too, because they're going to have to be there the whole time the student needs the access.
I know one church that we're in communication with, their ultimate goal would be to have a small amount of students inside that would be supervised. I know we're still in communication with that church and waiting approval because they have a lot of logistics they need to work out in order to make that happen. But that would be our vision, is that it would be indoor access, that you'd have a place to sit and work. So that's what we're hoping for.
Right, and that's why the first question was how many are taking advantage? If we have 4 or 6 every day outside of Oxford Housing Authority or outside of Button STEM, and those are the ones who are there and needed, and that number could be managed maybe inside.
Yes, sir.
You said something that really hit me, and it's really one of the issues I think we face, and that is we're hoping to do X, Y, or Z. And my question is, how many children, students in this county are not able to access a internet, whatever? Roughly, how many who are in school are not able to do that?
So I would have to come back for that data for you. I can tell you, like I said, we had 650 families apply for MiFi, which that is the intent for, providing internet access to a household. And they could apply whether internet was too expensive or if it was not provided in their area. And they did have to indicate between those two when they applied. So that would be some interesting data to look at. In terms of who doesn't have devices, at this point, it's our kindergarten and first grade students, which I feel like is 800 students or so? That's a rough estimate. I know our K2 devices that we ordered was about 1,500, and we've gotten some of those in. So a rough estimate. Don't have a device from us, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a device in their house to use. I don't know if you have any information on paper packets, like how many students are having to come and...
We can definitely get that information for you.
Well, I'm not trying to, pin anybody down about it's 5 here and 5 there. My point is in general that we have a public school system that has been open for 4 weeks, and we have children in our county who do not have access, or whatever it might be, to be able to do what a lot of other kids are doing. Some of them having a very difficult time, you can understand. And what strikes me is, number one, how do we grade those kids? And number two, how can they possibly be learning adequately if they don't have what everybody else has? I mean, truthfully, and I don't looking for an answer, but truthfully, I would like to know, I think the board would like to know, what happens to those kids who don't have this? What happens to in terms of grade, in terms of all of that? And I don't think it's anybody's fault that we don't have them. Look what Wake County did. They sucked everything up for the next 3 years in terms of Chromebooks. But do you get, I think you get my point. I just want to know. I mean, I just want to know what's going to happen to those kids.
I think that's what drives us, the sense of urgency to try and secure more funding to be able to buy additional Wi-Fi's, or to just come up with a plan B, plan C. Okay, we're not going to get the devices in time, obviously, so what's our backup plan? So I would agree that that question is what's driving a lot of our department right now.
Thank you. You do a great job.
Thank you.
Board members, other questions? Thank you, Ms. Lofton. All right, Madam Superintendent, next is our enrollment numbers for day 20.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. These numbers have shifted a bit since we last spoke. This is something I always like to bring you because this directly impacts funding. Since we last talked, of course, the 10-day numbers matter. We sent you the 15-day numbers, and this evening we are sharing with you the 20-day drop-dead numbers. So, Dr. Myrick, will you provide the information for us, please?
Yes, thank you, Dr. McLean, Mr. Chair. Board members, today was the 20th day of school for us this year, and I've already shared the day 10 numbers with you earlier. And this year we did something a little differently. We looked at day 15 as well, when we are talking about our students enrolling and being counted. But this year, in addition to that, we also looked at just the last 2 years, which was last year and this year. And as you can see, we are at 6,955 students as of today that have enrolled in Granville County Public Schools.
I would like to note this is the difference of 276 students from last year's 20-day number. A difference of 276. That is right in line with what we expected when we prepared our budget. Right in line. I thought this was interesting. This is in your folders. Thank you, Dr. Myron.
Board members, do you have questions regarding those numbers? Yes, Attorney?
Well, I just want to note that as of last week,
You need to get very close so that the folks that are participating in the live stream can hear.
okay, it sounds very loud over here. That with House Bill 1105 that passed last week, there is an ADM hold harmless, so the district should not lose funding this year based on the decrease in daily membership. Now, that may mean that you feel it double next year, but you will be held harmless for your per pupil funding from the state this year.
Thank you so much for this.
Question. The 3,800 kids that is slated to go to the virtual, long-term virtual, how's that going to affect local?
The question was how that might be affected by students who are going to on a virtual charter school, which has been allowed to, virtual academy, which has been allowed to expand its membership. The answer is the state is still determining that because they have this ADM hold harmless, but also at the same time allow the virtual charter school to expand its enrollment. So the last I saw was that they have essentially directed DPI to figure that out. But the bottom line is, with the legislation is that for this year, you should not see a decrease in funding. That your state funding will be based on the higher of your actual ADM or your estimate based on last year. But am I saying that right? Okay.
Board members, any other further questions? All right, thank you, Dr. Meyer. Next up, Madam Superintendent, is the policy updates from Dr. Meyer.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Myrick. We have some policies that needed to come forward this evening. I turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. McLean. This policy, 3400, evaluation of student progress, and the regulation that accompanies this policy, there's a change from the 25% to the 20%. The board voted last spring, in 2019, to move to the state percentage of final exam count. And so this policy is a cross-reference to that policy 3410 that you approved last year, and we did not catch this policy. So I'm bringing this tonight to be in line with the other policies that we have approved with the 20% instead of the 25%.
All right, thank you, Dr. Meyer. So this comes to us as a first read board. This is changing the language there from the 25 to 20%. You have two options tonight. You can let this stand as a first read and this will come back to you. Or if someone is so inclined, they can ask to waive the second read and approve the motion tonight.
I have a question about this policy.
Yes, Mr. Rivers.
Dr. Murphy, can you explain why we're going from 25% to 20%? I'm not either opposed or in favor. I just want to know why we're doing that.
Right. So it had been 25% is what our district had. And then a couple of years ago, the Department of Public Instruction changed it from 25% to 20% as a requirement that the EOCs would count towards a final exam grade, towards a final grade for a student. So we have changed ours to be in line with what the state requires.
So if my understanding is correct, then, and again, this may have changed in a few years since my children were at Webb, but the EOC now is counting as the final exam as opposed to a locally generated final exam by the teacher. Is that correct?
That's correct. In courses where there's a final exam, or in the case of CTE classes, the final test for CTE students, those exams take the place of the teacher-made exams, and it counts as 20% of the student's final grade. But if a student has a class that is not an EOC, that does not have an EOC attached to it, that assignment, that final grade will also count as 20% of the student's grade at the end of the semester.
So if a teacher, say in history, which is not one of the EOC classes, if a teacher just gives their own generated final exam, the teacher is required to have that only count 20%?
Yes, sir.
So why would we want to do that? That takes away a lot of freedom from the teachers to teach the way they want to teach. I mean, is there some?
This is the final percentage of how much the exam that the students take at the end of the quarter count towards their overall grade.
Right, I understand that, but it seems like we're unduly hampering the teachers. I mean, some teachers may want to have the final count for 40%, or maybe have the final. Maybe they give 3 midterms and don't want a final. I mean, why would we want to hamstring our teachers like this?
Well, we wanted it to be in line with what the students were getting that were taking in the course exams, to be fair and equitable across all content areas and courses.
Is this a local thing that are we following DPI requirements?
DPI requirements, yes.
For non-EOC classes?
Yes.
So you have a policy 3410 that speaks of how much the EOC or CTE post-test or any of the standardized tests to count in the final grade. And And last April, this board updated that policy from 25% to 20, which was based on the state changing its policy. My understanding is that when doing that, the board neglected to notice that this policy was then not allowed, because this policy also mentions what percentage of the team. Now, I think that how much the standardized tests count is a creature of state board policy. I'm not sure that the state board tells you how much a teacher-made test does count. So that would be a local to teachers. Right, but, so the staff is recommending that courses that have teacher-made tests would follow the same grading policy as courses that have state tests.
Yes.
Okay.
So I guess I'm curious as to why we would want to recommend that.
Well, it sounds like we've already done it already, and just bringing this policy in line with what we did in last April.
We did it for the EOC test, not for, say, Calc AB or chemistry or, civics or government. So those tests, the teachers in the past have made their own final exams, and they have chosen to weight them how they wanted to. And my question is, why would we take that freedom away from the teachers?
And just one clarification, I don't think teachers had that freedom before, because this policy has been in place, but this policy was previously that they had to pay.
It was 25 before, and they are finding it 20% now because the state has moved DOCs to 20%.
Right, but I'm talking about non-EOC classes.
I think they're saying already the teachers have to follow that percentage. They didn't have the flexibility before. So they're not taking the flexibility away. They're just changing the percentage.
I thought I heard Dr. McLean, when she made her first comments about 2 minutes ago, state that teachers did not have to do that for non-EOC classes. I am confused now.
Now, since this is a first read, is this something we might need to go a little deeper in and come back with those answers at the next meeting? Would that suffice to get your answers?
Right, I'm just curious, I mean, you just hate to lock teachers in who may have different ways of teaching their classes. So, but Dr. McLean, you may have some input you want to give to us of why that's a good idea or not a good idea, but if it's not a state requirement, I think we ought to let our teachers have some flexibility in that.
Right, so your
The
current
flexibility is
policy,
not there.
your current policy, which was last updated 2 years ago, although I don't know when this requirement was added, is that final exams will count 25% in all classes. So the only change they're bringing is to change that from 25 to 20. Right. So that's a separate question from does your policy have to say that? And I think is what you're asking.
Correct.
But they are not recommending that this is going to be possible.
But I'd just like some clarification, and maybe what we want to do is this, but I think I agree with the board chair, we should definitely not vote on this one tonight.
Okay. All right, so Madam Superintendent, if you can come back with a little bit of answers to those questions for our second reading. All right, board, any further questions about those policies? All right, so that will appear on our October agenda.
If we could get clarification on the questions, please, Mr. Chair.
Can you clarify that one more time, restate that, Mr. Chairman?
Right, my question is, on the non-EOC classes that are not governed by DPI, do we want to allow our teachers to have the flexibility to weight the final exam grade as they see fit to teach their class? And if we don't, why do we want to force them to go to 20%?
You have those down? Anything else?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Roots. All right, next, Madam Superintendent, I believe we're moving to our school improvement plan timeline.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. At this time, I'd like to invite Ms. Michelle Robinson, our Director of Elementary Schools, PD, and School Improvement, and Dr. Paulette Thompson, our Director of Grants, Federal Programs, Agricultural Choice, and Ms. Hill, who will be presenting our school improvement timeline. Good evening, ladies.
Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Chair, Dr. McLean, board members. Is this close enough? Can you hear? Very good. So we're here to talk with you for just a brief moment tonight about our annual school improvement review process. This is an annual process that is required by the state. And we are coming to you tonight with a few proposals, one being a change to the timeline going forward, and then a modification for this year until we can get to that point. So part of what we're trying to accomplish is to synchronize some timelines that our schools have to adhere to, and if we can tighten those up and get them more in sync, it'll make it easier. So Dr. Thompson's going to talk a little bit about Title I and the relationship to school improvement, and then we'll talk about what we're asking tonight.
Good evening, board members. As Ms. Robinson mentioned, we are attempting to synchronize some of our processes that we have related to school improvement planning. We would like to synchronize our district-wide school improvement planning process and our Title I school-wide planning process. In our current practice, our school improvement plans serve as our Title I school-wide plans as well. So with that, we are asking for an extension of the approval from the 1920 school improvement plan for our Title I schools only, so that they may submit their Title I school-wide budget plans before the October 1st date occurs, and they are able to spend their Title I funds.
So what that means going forward, what you're seeing here, and you've seen in the slides that were posted, is we would like to move this process of school improvement review and approval so that it starts in the month of September. And you would vote on plans in October, which would align with the Title I needs so that schools can go ahead and spend their Title I money. That's one proposal that we would move to this timeline on an annual basis. This year, we need a transition year to allow some of that to occur, as well as we wanted to give our schools as much time as possible to collect some data at the beginning of this school year as they're starting to develop their plans. So what you're seeing here is what the timeline would look like going forward starting next year. That we would present plans to you in September, you would vote on them in October, schools could start spending their funds in October, and then they would submit to the state in December. So this year, the modification for that, go ahead, Sam, one more time, is that we would actually bring you this year the plans in October. At your first board meeting in October, we will bring you the new plans. You would have from October 6th through October the 19th to review them. Then at your work session on October 19th, you would meet with the principals from the schools identified as low performing to have some conversation, and then you would actually vote on the plans in November. So this year we are essentially 1 month delayed, which is why Dr. Thompson is asking if the current standing board-approved plan from 1920 can stand for Title I purposes for this year until we can get these timelines in line. So we're asking for approval of the existing plans for Title I, the change of the timeline for modification for this year and starting next year. Also in the slides are a set of questions that are questions that you all have asked in years past. Back up one, there you go. So these are questions that have been asked in the past that have guided your conversations with the principal. They have used these to develop an executive summary, which is then presented to you with the plan. So we also are seeking approval of these as the questions that would guide the October 19th meeting. So a few things we have going on. Then lastly, Dr. Whitworth, go ahead. We are, as part of this process, in order to facilitate the process more efficiently and effectively going forward, our work with schools this year would be that they would write school improvement plans with 2-year goals. Have annual metrics, but 2-year goals that would allow that plan to not expire every June, but would always be a year out. So a few things we're looking for tonight. Any questions about that?
Mr. Rivers?
Thank you. Having served on a number of school improvement school improvement plan teams, how are you going to have a plan ready from the school by September? It took us several months from all the ones I served on. Are the teams going to meet in the spring and come up with a plan that will be ready in September? Is that how you're going to do it?
So if we can get on a cycle where schools are planning 2 years out, if we can have 2-year goals, then every year they're not planning for the upcoming year, they're planning for the next year. So that we always have that continuous improvement cycle in place. The school improvement plans always follow that cycle of assess, create, and monitor, right? As you get new information, get new data, you assess it, you decide what actions need to take place in the school, and then you monitor the effect of those actions. So school improvement plans are always in flux or in flow. This would just allow us to get a little ahead so that we're not always planning for literally the next year, but are planning in a continuous cycle. Does that answer the question?
It does, but when do the parents who meet with the teachers and are on the school improvement plan team, when will they help craft the school improvement plan? We did it in the fall in years past, but now there's no time to have it ready for a September deadline.
So this year, it would happen this month and up until October 5th. But next year, it could happen in the spring, so that because you've already got your goals set and now you're working on what are the actions that are needed to accomplish those goals.
The other thing that concerns me is if you have a 2-year plan and the school falls well short for whatever reason, there's a change of principal, there was something, a lot of teachers retired in the middle of the school year, there's something went on, and that school went from a B to a D or something. So what you're saying is the school improvement plan would not take effect that next year where you're trying to remediate a bad effect from the previous spring. You'd have to wait for another year before you would take those remediations. Is that right?
Except that we're in that constant continuous improvement cycle. So when that new data came in, we would immediately make the adjustments as needed in the plan to address the new set of data. So those goals may shift, those performance measures may shift just as the new data comes in.
Does that require board approval?
It requires that it be brought to the board. Yes, annually in the fall.
Yes, still not exactly convinced this is the best way to go.
Other questions, board members? So, Ms. Robinson, am I correct that you're bringing these 4 recommendations to us to act on tonight?
Yes, sir.
All right, so board members, you see the actions in front of you tonight that are recommendations from the staff that have several different tentacles to it. And so you either have the option to do these individually or you can do them as a group. What would be the pleasure of the board? Okay, so you're making a motion to approve these as a group?
Before we do that, could Dr. McLean perhaps, is this something that you think is valuable, to have a 2-year plan?
Yes. This actually also went through our academic committee as well. This was presented to them a few weeks ago. The plans are moved to a 2-year cycle, and this, they approved as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion by Dr. McKnight to approve all 4 recommendations related to school improvement plans. We have a second by Dr. Houlihan. Do we have any further discussion?
Yeah, Rob, Mr. Chair. Rob, I think you're on target in terms of what you're saying. The problem is that there's no good way to do this. You know, a plan is a plan, be it 1 year or 2 years or whatever. Is it effective? Good. If it's not effective, it could be 5 years. So, I mean, it was presented to our committee, and we talked about it extensively, and some of us had some real heartburn issues, but at the end of the day, it's the best we can do.
I do think this is an opportunity to not only do this different, but actually make it a little bit more meaningful. Because in the past, what would happen with school improvement is we would start making plans for all of the data coming out of the fall. Moving to this cycle, you could actually start to meet after some of that data comes out in the fall, and then you just adjust the plan. So if something's not working, you don't have to prep the entire school improvement plan. You just make adjustments based on the data. But the plan keeps rolling, and it just allows us to shift. I'm thinking it allows us to shift the timeline a little bit. So you can actually wait till you get some of that data from that from the state in the fall before you finalize some of the plans. It's actually pretty good.
One other point, as far as procedures, if the academic committee or the finance committee or the operations committee reviews things and makes a decision, is there a way that can be communicated to the board via email so that, you know, Dr. Houlihan made a good point a few meetings ago about not being surprised? It'd been nice to have known that the academic committee had already approved this. Is there a way that we can get the committee's findings or recommendations out to the board after, you know, real time when they're made? Like we have a meeting on a Wednesday, that we get an email that evening, the rest of us.
Yeah, let me work with the superintendent on that kind of process.
Okay.
And yes, we can definitely communicate
I appreciate
in
it.
some way.
Thank you.
Give me 1 second. Shorthand's not that quick tonight. All right, so we do have a motion on the floor, made by Dr. McKnight, seconded by Dr. Houlihan, to approve the 4 recommendations as presented by the staff concerning school improvement plans. If there's no other discussion, if you're ready to vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right, that'll carry. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
All right, Madam Superintendent, next we have policy changes concerning Title IX.
Absolutely. Title IX was brought to our attention by the School Boards Association. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to our attorney, if I may, to just brief us, she and Dr. Meyer, on this Title IX piece.
Board members, you'll see some significant policy revisions here. These arise out of new Title IX regulations that were issued by the Department of Education this year, which went into effect August 14th. They are specific to how allegations of sexual harassment and assault are investigated on campus, so they don't affect other portions of the Title IX policies that are specifically about sexual harassment. These policy changes are in general to implement those federal requirements, so it's fused pretty carefully to those federal regulations. It will require some staff training, and I have been in communication with the senior staff about that. They were implemented quite quickly. As I noted, it's gone into effect August 14th, and your Title IX coordinator is aware that if a complaint were to come in during this policy review period, we would still make sure we were in line with the federal regulations, even though the policies are not updated yet. But in the meantime, you know, the School Board Association has put out these changes.
Dr. Meyer, do you have anything to add?
Just to add to what Eva was saying, policy summary chart, the first document on board docs and the second document on board docs, special PLS update. It kind of goes into detail about each one of these policies and what the changes are and what it looks like. So if you want, when you're reviewing these policies, it may be helpful if you would look at those two documents as well, kind of give you some context.
Riveting reading, believe me. All right, board members, what questions or comments do you have?
This is the first read.
It is a first read. It was brought to us. We do realize that there's quite a bit there. We kind of warned you about that back in July when we knew this was coming down. So yes, first read, it would come back to you in October unless you wanted to waive that second read tonight.
I would like to wait till October. We got this on the 10th, and I started reading this weekend, but I couldn't delve into it.
I will note that there have been legal challenges to these new federal regulations, and so there is some concern about adopting these policy changes and then having to change it back if the new regulations are invalidated. But at this point, they're in place. They are binding. So other than some boards are adopting them as interim rather than final policy changes, but you don't really have a lot of choice in whether or not to adhere to the new regulations. But I do agree with having a second reading because they are very complicated.
Okay. It sounds like we've got a kind of agreement that we'll move forward to allow this to be on the October agenda. All right. Next, Madam Superintendent, our reentry update.
Absolutely. Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dr. Winford. Very good. Dr. Winford and I will be managing our reentry update with you this evening. I will be beginning and will have several individuals joining us for tonight's presentation. I will begin. This is some of the most challenging work that has confronted schools, school districts, staffs, superintendents, boards of education, and families across our state and nation ever. Balancing academic and health needs in the wake of a national pandemic has proven nothing short of unyielding and unrelenting at times. But please know, in Granville County Public Schools, we all remain hopeful, steadfast, and ready to pivot as new information and decisions are made. We want children back in schools where they can learn and grow, receive healthy meals, have their emotional health observed, and so much more every single day. But we must do it safely. So tonight you will hear information as promised, where we will bring forth an array of information to be considered by our Board of Education. We ask for continued patience, because all of this we are learning every time we sit in a webinar or on a Zoom meeting or just anywhere to learn more requires new skills of navigation, as we are all learning a new way of having or doing school, and a new way to support thinking about how school is done. So please, try to save your questions until the end, but if something is burning or misunderstood, please don't hesitate to stop us. With that in mind, tonight's reentry work consists of 5 areas. They are on the screen. We will reassess as promised at the 4-week mark. We are delighted to have with us tonight our local health experts, whom I'm privileged to work with almost every week. We have our lead nurse with us this evening and experts from our health department. We will review readiness indicators and survey results, both quantifiable and quantifiable information. We will offer Plan B structures for possible consideration with staggered reentry plans. We will receive direction and hear deliberation from our board. I'd like to take you down memory lane for just a moment, if you will, and I would like to remind everyone, if you pay attention to the screen for just a moment, that all districts in the state of North Carolina had to have 3 plans. We all had to develop 3 plans based on the K-12 decision tree found in the toolkit, based on feedback from DHHS, the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, and the North Carolina State Board of Education in partnership with the governor. Now, it was clear at that time that we were awaiting the governor's decision because districts were going to be allowed to be more stringent than his decision, but not less stringent, meaning Plan A was never an option in any district in the state of North Carolina. Next slide. The governor's decision on July 14th was rendered, and it was for schools to open under Plan B. It was for everyone to have face coverings, fewer children in classrooms, measures to ensure social distancing for everyone in the building, and other safety protocols. But districts may choose to conduct school entirely by remote learning. On July 23rd, it was decided at a special called meeting by the Granville County Board of Education in a vote of 6-2, we would begin our academic year remotely, hence our being here this evening. Our board also granted me, the superintendent, the authority to reassess and make modifications to the reentry plan in consultation with the health department at the 4-week mark. So we are here this evening and we will be sharing with you information. Next slide, please. I thought it was important for you to see this map of the state of North Carolina and where our county was located. We see that our Board of Education made a decision whereby we are not alone, and you can see this from our map of the state. The Board of Education's decision to go with Plan C is consistent with the vast majority of our region and the majority of our state at this time. However, I can honestly say many of us, as I talk with my colleagues across the state, want our children in school. So we are learning, we have been communicating with districts that have begun on Plan B, trying to learn the best practices, the errors, what would you have done differently, what do you recommend. We're all asking lots of questions so that in the event we are permitted to make this transition, we do it well, we do it strategically, we do it carefully, and we do it safely. Next slide, please. Where is North Carolina right now? North Carolina has moved into what is called Phase 2.5, and that began on September 4th at 5 p.m. And phase coverings are still in place, and you can see this chart. There are many things that relate, not necessarily with schools, but it addresses Plan B and Plan C, and when determined appropriate, we will deal more with this chart. But playgrounds, our playgrounds will be disinfected, and we will continue to work on what this means for our schools with social distancing and things of that nature. Next slide. In terms of reopening, many of you know, but I'd like to bring attention to the fact that we continue to work with the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, the CDC, our DHHS, and our local experts weekly. We have put together a 16 committee reentry team
Individuals from all over our school system have worked since the spring to put together procedures and protocols that will need to be followed very closely in order for us to return to school well. And what I mean by that is safely. In order for us to return safely in every area, from transportation to child nutrition to classroom spacing. How shall we do it? Well, we place this in our reopening plans. Thanks to the members of those teams, and I'd like to publicly thank everyone who made contributions because they researched, they reached out across the state, found information, and I'm most appreciative for their work. Our district nurses and health officials are here tonight. We now have a new task force who's looking very closely at the possibility of Plan B with us, and I will continue my work with them. Our work with them will pay huge dividends because now the work begins with this Plan B, and we need their input. They're representing many areas of our workforce internal to Granville County Public Schools, and we appreciate their time. Also recently, we've been selected to be a part of a study by Duke University and UNC. The research study will not tell us what to do. Instead, it will help guide our thinking and help us with the science behind the research. What I can tell you we've learned above all is that there is no magic bullet and no one metric to this work. There's no magic answer out there, and everyone has been cautioned to pay close attention to your community. That's what we're doing. So as you can see, we've worked really hard to try to gather tons of information for everyone at all times, because this is a very serious matter. Our children, our educators, everyone coming together. While there's some doing it quite well, there's others we want to learn from. This is nothing where we want to just go at it haphazardly. So we will be bringing you the best information we can over the next days and weeks and months as we try to do this very, very well. At this time, I'd like to ask our healthcare partners to join me at the podium, if you will. This evening, we have with us Ms. Lisa Harrison, our health director from Granville Vance Health Department, Dr. Shauna Guthrie. We're so delighted to have these ladies with us. Our physician she's the medical director from Granville Vance Health Department. And we have our very own Ms. Missy Cottrell, our head nurse from Granville County Public Schools. Ladies, welcome and thank you so much, not only for being here tonight, but for all you do personally on a daily basis with us in Granville County Public Schools. I turn the presentation over to you at this time. Next slide.
Thank you so much for having us tonight. We are going to start with a series of being thankful and commending you for a job well done so far. Even as I walked in tonight and was properly screened, you can see a lot of the work that's been done to prepare for children to come back to school safely by the staff and administration of the school system. And we have been working very closely together. We appreciate the partnership between Granville County Public Schools and your local health department. We appreciate your following the public health guidelines of the 3 W's, wearing your masks, everyone, thank you, waiting 6 feet apart, and making sure that you're washing your hands frequently or using that hand sanitizer. I have some in the back if you need it before you leave, and there are plenty of restrooms available. So thank you for following those guidelines. I appreciate the thoughtfulness and hard work going on all over this county, and we'll continue to be with you as we journey together through the journey of COVID-19. I think it's important to talk about data and facts tonight, that we can put our heads around what COVID-19 looks like in Granville County and in North Carolina. So you can see in these graphs that we have available the number of cases we've seen over time since the spring of the year. I can tell you as of today, we have over time 1,659 cases. If you combine what's there in the different colored graphs, which include the community of Granville County, long-term care facility outbreaks in pink, In light blue, we have the prison system in Butner. In bright green with the 785 number, we have the community and Vance County. And then we have Vance County long-term care facilities. We are a district health department, so you can compare yourself easily to Vance County as we go through the data. These are test results that were received between April and August. So you can see as our tests have increased over time, so have the positives. And so we look at the rate of positives over time so we can get a sense of where we are relative to the increased testing. We today, between September 1st and today, so a few weeks now, 2 weeks, we have a positive test rate of 5.34%. Over time, that has wavered between 5 and 10% in the last 3 months. We get from the state of North Carolina a summary of surveillance data that our staff are helpful in entering and analyzing. And so you can see they've added in the color bars the ages of those with positive tests. So the orange is those who are younger than 1, and the blue is ages 2 to 4, and the pink is ages 5 to 9, and the yellow is ages 10 to 14. Red is 15 to 17, and the larger block of those bars is blue, and that's the ages 18 to 24. They've just started at the state level adding these ages because we're really just now getting a good sense of widespread testing of younger children. And so I think that's an important point to make, that we don't know what we don't know, and we're certainly still learning so much together, including how this affects children, how transmission happens in children, and we do know transmission happens among children and from children to adults. We also know we have lost 6 souls of those under age 18 across the United States of America so far. So COVID does kill children, and we do have to be careful as we make these decisions together to keep children and staff safe. So even though children may be less likely to become as infected after exposure, and younger children, there's sort of a gradient of the less severe illness in asymptomatic coronavirus versus more severe illness that happens in older children. But we do know 10 years and older, people can transmit the virus just as easily as adults can. And we see in other countries with social distancing and masking in place, lower spread in elementary schools. So finding ways to encourage our children to follow the public health rules will be helpful. Oftentimes we see a difference between transmission in households and transmission outside of households, and Dr. Guthrie has a good graph that she showed me recently about other countries and comparisons where children have gone back to school and what it looks like in the household spread versus non-household spread. So it's just interesting to see that you have less likelihood of spreading in a household if you're under 10. And that's good news for parents, for sure. And then similar spread rates above age 10 as we see in our community. So in the United States, we do have over, let me see, I wrote this down so I know the exact number of cases of the MISC, or multi-system inflammatory syndrome. And that's the scary part of more severe illness that we see in children. And so across the country, we have approximately 350 cases of MISC. Fewer, thankfully, not many cases at all in North Carolina, but fewer than 20. The symptoms can tend to last 2 to 4 weeks after infection, and we have already gone over a number of the common symptoms to COVID, but for MISC, we see irritability or decreased activity in children, abdominal pain without other explanation, diarrhea, vomiting, rash, pink eye, poor feeding, red cracked lips or bumpy tongue, and swollen hands and feet. And of course, we worry about hitting major organs and affecting major organs. And I'll ask if Dr. Guthrie has anything you'd like to add about that.
I actually don't have much to add. That was an excellent presentation of my slide. I think the important thing is to remember many more children have coronavirus than we know. When Lisa talks about that positivity rate, ideally we can get it down to 3 or 4%. That means we're not missing as many positives. We're getting a lot of negatives, so we're not missing as many positives either. And a lot of these cases of children, maybe they had a little cold, maybe they had nothing, and then they get really, really sick like this, and they find out they had coronavirus previously because they have antibodies. So it's really important to remember a child doesn't have to have known coronavirus to be sick with this illness, and these kids are sick, very, very sick, unlike most kids who catch coronavirus. So unfortunately, we've seen in adults as well many long-term problematic outcomes, and this is one for children.
So the state of North Carolina has worked closely with school systems and health departments and encouraged us to work together. Thankfully, that is easy for us as we have long-standing, trusting relationships here locally. And we have been able to talk through a lot of the screening and approaches to opening safely. And Dr. Guthrie is the one who actually hosts for all of our school nurses and administrators across the district conversations every other week on Tuesday at 3 p.m. Every other week, we have an opportunity to share the latest guidance from the school system, to have our own medical director weigh in on that guidance and answer questions. So maybe you'd like to take the microphone again and tell the board how that has gone so far.
I do want to thank you, those of you that have attended, and especially the school nurses who've taken time out of their day to attend the webinars. I know they aren't at the most ideal time for some of you, and I will say, those that want to get just in general the weekly and daily data, you can go to the GBPH website, click on COVID-19, scroll to the bottom and sign up. You can also contact Lisa or me or really anyone at the health department to get on the mailing list if you're a school employee and you aren't attending those webinars and you would like to. Each webinar, as she said, we really just go over kind of the local data, what we're looking out for, any updates from the state, and answer questions, which now that we've gone into a few, people are a little more forthcoming with questions, which is wonderful. We encourage people to email during the week with questions that aren't urgent, of course, not immediately related to a patient. And when questions come in about students or family members or staff members during the week, the nurses consult with me about those, and I'm able to include the answers to those kind of questions that people are having in real life on the webinar. So the goal is that they're very practical and that they serve as a condensed updated information on a state level, so that hopefully you folks don't have to go 10 different places to get the information that you need to do a great job every day.
We are so very grateful for our partnership with our local health department, and you all. It's invaluable to us, especially during this time. We do also have guidelines, requirements from the state of North Carolina. And one of these guidelines, it's about symptom screening. And it states that schools are required to enforce that staff and students stay home if they have tested positive or if they are showing COVID-19 symptoms. Or if they have recently had close contact with a person with COVID-19 symptoms. The state also tells us that we have to conduct screening symptoms utilizing a symptom screening system and process. So we have developed one, and what we have done is taken the criteria from our North Carolina schools, and we have developed an electronic form. So you all experienced it tonight as you walked in, and that's what we do each and every day, each and every time someone comes into our schools. Sometimes 6 times a day for the same person. But I think we just added up our numbers, and for the last 5 days we've done, or last 5 school days, we've done 4,669 screenings. So that gives us a lot of information. The idea of that is that we want to reduce the transmission of COVID. And that's the best way, the best tool we have to reduce the transmission of COVID. Would y'all like to add anything to that? Yes.
So when there is an individual who's positive, who's sent home for symptoms, or has been a contact, which means within 6 feet for 15 minutes within the past 14 days of someone who did test positive, legally, you guys have to contact the health department. So what I reiterated on our calls is, you're not in this alone. We are there for you. You're going to get the hang of it as time goes on, unfortunately. But you do have to notify us, and then we talk through what's going on. And as you know, in a school where there are people of all ages, and some kids are better than others at not touching each other and sharing things, a lot of times it's really talking through the situation and where did they go and how long were they there and then where did they go, and and getting other people's story of the situation to kind of figure out what happened. The nurses have been really valuable to do that. So anytime in the community or anywhere the health department's notified of someone who has tested positive, we immediately call them and talk to them about how they need to stay home for at least 10 days and until they're feeling better. And we find out who they've been around within 48 hours of their symptoms starting, or if they never had symptoms within 48 hours of their positive test. And then we call all those people and notify them that they're a contact to someone who's tested positive. We don't necessarily tell them when, although if they can do some basic math, they can usually figure it out. But we don't tell them who, because that is, if you're positive, that's your protected health information. So we're not going to say, Susie in your class tested positive, so you need to stay home. We're going to say someone you've been in contact. We're not even going to say in school necessarily. Someone you've been in contact with has tested positive. And those individuals need to stay home for 14 days from their last contact. Usually that's pretty straightforward. With the schools, it's a little less because we have families where there are multiple children in school. We have parents who work in the schools. And for an individual's 14-day quarantine countdown to start, they have to stop being exposed to that positive person. So there are going to be situations where maybe a brother tests positive and he has to get through his 10 days while his sister is out of school, and then she has to go 14 more days until she's in the clear. Because there's at least usually more like a 5-day incubation period. So when you're exposed, you don't even kind of catch it, if you're going to catch it, until day 5, 6, 7, and up to 14 days. About 99% of people who are going to catch it by day 14, and that's why it's a 14-day quarantine period. I also just want to remind people that if you test negative, all that really means is right now, right this moment, you tested negative. Doesn't mean you're negative tomorrow. If you were exposed yesterday, you might be negative today. You might be negative in 10 days. And on day 11, you might get tested and be positive. And certainly, as you all know, you don't have to have symptoms to have coronavirus and test positive, unfortunately, which makes it very difficult.
Just one last conclusion for you that I think is helpful, because there's a policy center called the Kaiser Family Foundation out of California. And the Kaiser Family Foundation is a not-for-profit, non-political research institution that did a lot of studying about school-age children. And the conclusion that they made in a recent article is, I went too far. Let me get back there. It says that taken together, the evidence indicates that while children are much less likely than adults to become severely ill from COVID-19, they do transmit virus. It is still unclear to what extent children, especially younger ones, are likely to get infected or transmit that infection to others compared to adults. However, where there is already widespread community transmission, like here, as is the case in many areas in the United States, there's clearly a risk of spread associated with reopening schools. This challenge may be more pronounced where testing and contact tracing capacity is limited. As such, the risk of reopening schools needs to be considered carefully in light of the recognized benefits of in-person education. We certainly support your decisions. We certainly support your children and families. We're here for you to do testing and contact tracing and partnering on big decisions. We will always look at the data and local context and help you all make decisions. I wish there were, like Dr. McLean said, a magic metric or a magic bullet where we could say, here at this number, flashing red light, no moving forward, cannot open, must close. And I wish there were this wonderful magic number, an indicator that could shine a flashing green light and say, okay, we're all safe, we're ready to go, we've got all of our public health approaches in order, and our screening, and our mask wearing, and our hand washing, and our waiting 6 feet apart, and everybody's cooperating, and we are good to go. I wish those things were really easy and red light and green light, but they are not. They're very case by case and community by community, outbreak by outbreak, cluster by cluster, and family by family. We are here at your local health department to work with you to navigate all of that. It's not going to be easy. But we look forward to continuing this partnership, Dr. McLean, and we will work on it together the best we can. Thank you. Let us know if you have any questions, or would you like to proceed and do questions later?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. If you ladies will not go far, though, because I'll need you for another section.
Excellent.
If you'll just stay put. Thank you so very much. Board, if I may ask you to turn your attention to Plan B, these ladies will be needed for another section of your readiness indicators in just a moment. So we will just take a look at the Plan B overview, and then they will come right back up. I'd just like to remind everyone that our Plan B overview was provided July 2nd, and you've already approved a Plan B for Granville County Public Schools. Do you recall that? From July, we've already approved a Plan B, and it consists of having students join us in-house if they signed up for face-to-face for 2 days in 2 groups, an A group and a B group, with a remote day on Wednesdays as we have on the screen, and the Group A and Group B groups will alternate. This summer, we asked parents to select the best learning option for his or her child through a safe measure. And parents were provided 3 options: Granville Academy, full remote, and blended learning. And we thank our parents for signing up for their option. And we're asking everyone to stay put, and we will be revisiting that at the semester point. But for those who signed up for face-to-face, your child has been signed up for a Group A or a Group B at this point, and schools will be notifying you, if you don't already know, which group your child will be in. Next slide. There are 2 steps to this process. That very same day, you also approved a staggered entry. Board members, I hope you recall that. We agreed that if we were to bring students back, we would do it gradually, we would do it safely, and we would stagger students in. At this point, because some of our students and families did actually sign up for the virtual learning, it will call for about 17% of our student population to be in Group A1, Group A2, Group B1, and Group B2. This will be even smaller pods of students at a time. Now, why is that important? Because when we say schooling will be a little different, it will. There will be new ways. The movement in the halls will be different. Lunch will not be served in a large cafeteria with students reporting to the cafeteria. We have to relearn how we will be doing things. So there will be new protocols, new procedures, new processes, new schooling. Visitors will not be permitted. Once we go through the screenings you just heard about, we want everyone safe. There's a new way of doing things. This is for youngsters who will report to school only 1 day a week, and we will do this very gradually for a period of time, and then we will go to a full Plan B. That's right, that is step 2. And all of this has already been approved. So I just wanted to give this gentle reminder to our listening audience and a reminder to our board so that we could just all be on the same page before we proceed. New standard operating procedures. Again, everyone has been working. You already know this about the screenings. That what we've learned is those who have been very careful and very strategic about temperature checks, symptom checks, we're going to need parents to really help us with this. Every time, you heard how many times we've been screening already in just the last 5 days. It's because every time someone enters that building, they are expected to get screened. This will be the case at every one of our buildings. Staff, students, and everyone. There will be no visitors allowed. Masks are required, but our youngsters will have mask breaks. And there are exceptions for eating, drinking, physical exertion, and allowances will be made for individuals with physical or developmental disorders. Emergency access will be permitted, and social distancing, much like we have this evening, is expected. It is required, and it's required at all times. So doing school differently will have to be learned. So just wanted to address that very briefly before we launch into the readiness indicators with Dr. Winborn. Dr. Winborn.
Thank you, Dr. McLean. Board members, you have previously received some previews about the readiness indicators. As Dr. McLean and our health experts have told us, there is no magic single indicator to help us through this. So we, along with the help of our committees and our task force, have come up with 4 general areas that we're going to be looking at to determine how ready we are to bring our children back. The first is the operational readiness. Our organization, Granville County Public Schools, can we accept these children back into our schools? Do we have what we need to do it? Bucket 2 is the COVID data, and that's where I'm going to call on Lisa and Dr. Guthrie to come back and talk just a little bit about that. And then category 3 is the stakeholder survey data. Those are the surveys, and I believe board members received the complete responses, the reports from those surveys. I'm going to be showing some highlights of that. And then finally, we're going to discuss some of the emerging research, and again, call on our experts to assist with that. So first, operational readiness. These are some of the things we're going to be looking at on a week-by-week basis. First of all, under the topic of health and safety, do we have sufficient inventory of PPE? You know, do we have enough for 30 days out? Do we have enough for 60 days out? We're talking about not just our face coverings, but the face shields that some teachers have requested, the gowns that some have requested, and the gloves, and so on and so forth. We have had difficulty in securing some of these in large supplies, but right now we feel confident that we have enough looking forward well into the fall, should we bring kids back on Plan B. So we're looking good there. Staff training, we are making a lot of progress in that regard. You can see the percentage of staff trained, both for the signs, symptoms, cleaning, and disinfecting. That was something that was required by all staff. We've got about 3/4 of them trained. And then we have 100% of our screeners trained. And big hats off to the nurses who've been working very hard with our school-based staff, making sure that they're ready. We're still working on our isolation room protocols. You will see that we are at 0 right now, but I believe that will be quickly changed over to 15, or the number of campuses we have. We're almost there. My recent conversation with Nurse Cottrell said that we'll be ready. And then our bus drivers, that's just simply a matter of getting them trained once the board decides when we're coming back. So I don't anticipate we'll have a problem with that as well. The next slide it speaks to the data on our screenings. You can see that in the top table. And then, again, just some more information about our facilities. By and large, we are ready. Our facilities are pretty much set up. We've got a few more stickers to put down, and we're looking at maybe some pylons or things like that. We've been talking with our fire marshals to make sure we can get all of that approved, but we feel like we're in great shape with our facilities. Personnel is an area of concern. Just over the past 4 weeks, we have had 41 staff members out, and this includes all staff, not just certified teachers. And they have been out for a variety of reasons as it relates to COVID. Some of them may have tested positive. Some may have just simply experienced symptoms and were required to wait out until they had that follow-up with their healthcare provider. And others were asked to sit out because they may have been exposed and they were quarantined. So also you'll see the number of substitutes available. We have personally confirmed that we have 32 dedicated, hardworking substitutes that are committed to help us. Now, this number concerns me. I do wish it was maybe 3 times higher. Many of our substitutes, as we know, are retired teachers and may consider themselves at risk. And for whatever reason, have decided maybe right now they're not excited about coming and being a substitute. So we'd love to put an all call out to everyone out there listening tonight on the streaming. If you are interested in becoming a substitute, please call me or Mr. Perry, our Director of HR right here. We would love to hire you. We're looking for people that love children, and we will get you trained and get you to work. So please reach out. We need you. So this takes us to the Readiness Indicator bucket number 2. And I'll ask Dr. Guthrie, Ms. Harrison, if you could come back up to the podium, because I'm going to show a chart that has a lot of data on it. Most of this came from actually your department, some of it from the State Department of Health and Human Services. But just a variety of metrics here, all important, but maybe you could talk to just a little bit about how to make sense of it all.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we have lots of different data points, local, state, nationwide, that we pay attention to on a regular basis. These data points include trends over time between August 17th and September 7th. And Dr. Guthrie is always good about asking our data folks to make weekly graphs so we can see these trends over time instead of just some of those bars that we used to have day over day. It is much more important to see trends in data than snapshots in time. It just tells us a better story that we can make better decisions about. These are cases per 100,000 residents is the first one. And you see those numbers are coming down. In July, we had as many as 850 per 100,000. Which was a lot more alarming. That number is coming down, but when we had 850 per 100,000, we made the top 25 list in North Carolina of LEAs that needed to pay attention to community spread and be extra careful. So we have stayed on that list regardless of that number coming down. The COVID-19 cases per 100 residents in the last 7 days that is targeted versus ideal is something that the state will look at. The percentage of cases ages 0 to 19. So you can see we've got about 7% in August of children under age 20 who have been infected with coronavirus. COVID-19 percentage of cases 0 to 17 is 11% over time. And then in our own county here locally, the county data that is only community spread, not associated with the Butner Federal Correctional Complex. Right now we have 1,000, today we reached the 1,000 mark in cases of community spread over time. And you can see the percentage here, so we need to look at that. New COVID-19 cases in the last 7 days. Percent positive of those who are tested. We've already talked a little bit about that tonight, and you see over time that's come down from 6% in August now to around 5% today. Looking at the last 2 weeks, I told you it was 5.34. So as we continue to increase testing, we look at the number of positives over time so that we can tell what that snapshot looks like and what that trend looks like.
Lisa, can you talk just a moment about the significance of that number, please? Because I know we talk about that number quite a bit.
So in our surveillance system in the health department, our nurses log in every morning, first thing, and they look at what this North Carolina electronic disease surveillance system tells us. And it tells us a series of things. It tells us what Granville and Vance County residents have positive test results confirmed for coronavirus. It also gives us data that lets us know how many people were tested as a whole. So we get like the total number of tests that were done. And we average about 2,000 tests per month in Granville County right now. It waxes and wanes depending on demand and depending on outbreaks that are active. Of course, We want to encourage people who are contacts to a positive to be tested. So sometimes those number tests go up. And so this percent positive gives us that trend line regardless of whether you're testing 1,000 people in a month or 2,000 people in a month. You still know the percent of those who are positive. So that's an important indicator that we're using worldwide to try to get a sense of community spread and how safe it is to be among the public in your local context. So we would like to see certainly well below 10% and ideally below 5% as sort of a safety zone of positive percentage of tests. But we get those data overall so we can know how many were negative, how many were positive. Thank you. We also look at hospitalizations. We report every afternoon on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. Our whole team across the 2 counties reports out a lot of this same data, so we have a sense of what's going on across the district. Ongoing clusters in schools is really important. Clusters, a defined cluster is 5 or more cases in one specific area. And so we pay attention to that, and we have been responding a great deal already to early child care centers and some private or charter schools who have gone back. We are experiencing clusters, and we are having to follow up and do contact tracing. So anything you would like to add about those data and their significance? Any questions you have about these data indicators and their significance? I can't stress enough the importance of trends over time and community context, and that's what we're here to help with.
Would you rather we hold our questions until the end? Or?
Let's go ahead and ask the health questions while we have these ladies here.
The testing is what concerns me. For instance, you say you want to be less than 5% positive test rates. So if you test, say, a population that you think might have it, you're going to have higher than 5% as opposed to if you tested the general population. The other thing that really concerns me is I've been reading quite a few papers lately about the efficacy of the testing. And my understanding is that the United States is using the PRC method, where they're looking at RNA strands. And maybe one of your comments, but what in North Carolina, and we use a 40-cycle test protocol, which many scientists are now saying is way too sensitive. We should be using about a 30 to 35 cycle protocol. The problem is there are many coronaviruses, including common cold, and a lot of scientists are concerned that with the sensitive repetitive cycling, taking one sample and cycling it 40 times, that you will pick up a random strand, say from a common cold or from a SARS-CoV or SARS coronavirus or some other coronavirus, and it will trigger a positive test. The other issue is that some tests in laboratories require 1 positive indicator out of 3, or 2 out of 3, or 1 out of 2, or just 1. So our tests aren't exactly married, they aren't exactly logical. So the whole question in my mind is the testing giving us the right data? And that's my background, is analyzing data and getting the efficacy of the data and the reliability of the data. It's my opinion from all that I've read, and looking at CDC statistics, that we are getting, our test data is maybe not telling us the whole data. In Granville County, for instance, we publish our total positive tests since the beginning was 1,600 and something today. In fact, since July 20th, we've never had more than 150 active cases at any one time. Today was 117. To me, that's a higher indicator, a more accurate indicator of where we are going with this. So I guess my question is, with the controversy about false positives in the testing, how do we really know what's a better indicator that we can use than the testing? Because the testing is subject to who's tested, the test used, how the test is implemented. So is there some other way that we can get a handle on what we are actually having in Granville County? We've had 2 deaths since July 20th. That's too many, but out of a population of almost 70,000 now, that's a relatively low amount. And there's also controversy about COVID deaths that are influenza deaths, or pneumonia deaths, or automobile accident deaths, and the like. So what's really troubling me as we try to make these decisions is I'm not confident at all in the data you're presenting. And I've got CDC pulled up right here on my website, and we can look at the deaths for children in the United States from the 5 and 7 range. There's 14 out of something like 15 million people in that population group. So we're seeing very, very low threat, and there's 4 times that many more influenza deaths for that same age group. So we're seeing influenza is more dangerous for children than COVID. So how can we, the picture you're painting is a very bleak one to me, but it's not what I'm seeing on the CDC and NC Department of Health and Human Services website. So can you maybe talk to why you think things are bleaker than what I'm seeing?
Yeah, well, I have a number of comments to make, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Guthrie, who had a lot more chemistry labs than I had. So I'm sure she has a lot that she can add to some of the big picture answer that I have for you. But certainly, data and information that we're working on is the best we have to go on. And there is a lot of good question that you bring up, and there's a lot of good question that our entire population is asking about the effectiveness of testing and how we're sharing data about people who have coronavirus and also have underlying health conditions. Those are very good points that I think we are certainly being as transparent as possible about. We are working really closely with our state, and the picture we paint is just the facts as we know them on the data, not necessarily trying to be alarmist or bleak. It's just to say, here's what we know. I think Maya Angelou had a wonderful quote that says, we do the best we can with what we know, and when we know better, we do better. And certainly that's the story around the science of coronavirus and what we are trying to do in public health to pay attention to the latest and the greatest science as it evolves. I mean, this is certainly very new still. That's why novel coronavirus has been hard to pinpoint how to attack and address the very best way possible because we're still learning so much. I think our responsibility as community members to keep our children safe is our main priority, and so making the best decisions we can with the data we have is our charge, knowing that we're going to continue to learn more. But specific to the effectiveness of the PCR diagnostic test, I'll let the doctor answer that.
Well, I think you actually know a lot more about them than I do, most likely. But yeah, there are issues around cycle times and which pieces of the virus they're testing and what those pieces look like and do they look like other viruses. As a health department, we don't have any control over which doctors pick which tests or which labs. And honestly, right now, we're in a situation where there's still a little bit of a shortage of testing and supplies to do that testing. And our really methodology is, where can we get a result quicker? Because if I get a result on you in 10 days, who cares? A bunch of people have already been exposed. They're already over it. You're over it. But we know that when we sacrifice the speed of a test, when we go for better speed, we sacrifice the quality of the test. And it's frustrating, and I agree with you. I don't have answers. One graph that as Lisa said, that I like is how many new cases per week. It matters, but I don't care that much what the total has been since the start, because the numbers get big and you stop understanding what they mean anyway. But knowing that Granville County had around 45 new cases in the past week, and Vance County had around 35, that's something we can wrap our brains around and understand. And then again, it's related to that percent positivity. So if we know that percent positivity rate is below 5%, we have a good idea we're testing enough people, because as you said, if I just test people with symptoms, we're going to have a much higher positivity rate than if I test people who are just walking around the community and don't even know they've been exposed. So we do not have answers for you. I will just add that the antigen testing, which is the rapid testing that we've heard of, is even worse. So if you go and get tested, if you have symptoms or if you've been exposed to someone and you have the antigen test, which is allowed by the state of North Carolina, if you've been exposed or you have symptoms and you test negative, you should still have the PCR that he mentioned. That's kind of the best we have test to make sure, because there are a good number of false negatives with that test and we don't want to miss. And yes, we do also have false positives. I think out of safety and just to protect people more. We haven't focused as much on the false positives, but those do occur as well.
But the FDA, for instance, has a report that states that you really cannot get a valid test unless you're symptomatic. In other words, if you are symptomatic, there's enough virus in you. If in fact it is a COVID infection, not a cold or flu, that there's enough virus in you that will give an accurate test. So they're saying you have to be both symptomatic and have a test. One of the things that concerns me is CDC is saying that as many as 80% of tests could be asymptomatic. You may get a positive test and you're asymptomatic. To me, the most logical explanation is that you don't have it, that you tested false positive. If you have no symptoms, you're never sick, and you test positive. And there have been cases, friends of mine, where fear of exposure, the whole family got tested, 5 members of the family. Wife tested negative, husband and 3 sons tested positive. None had any symptoms ever. And the wife never tested, with multiple tests, never tested positive, which makes me believe that none of them ever had it, even though they had those positive results. How could the wife not get it when supposedly the husband was more exposed, and they're obviously much closer than you and I would be in the food line? So the question, I don't know how we're going to be able to really understand, other than our hospitalizations are low in Granville County, and our total daily caseload, based on a population of 60 to 70,000, is relatively low and trending downward. I think those are things that we can take to the bank.
I agree. Following the trends downward, seeing less and less new cases per week is going to be really important for us to watch, and hopefully people will come up with new tests and new methods, and the FDA will do more approvals of tests, because a lot of the tests we have now are under emergency use authorization, which is not very stringent. So there's, we're all learning as this goes on, and everyone is researching, and new papers come out every day, and it's an interesting time. With not as many answers as you'd like.
The tests are supposed to be reliable if you have symptoms, but if you don't have symptoms, just going out and screening, the data is showing a lot of false positives. And that's not how the tests were designed to be used.
Right, and at the health department, what we recommend is testing if you've been a contact and testing if you have symptoms. For that reason, if you're just wandering in the community, you don't know of any contact, you don't have symptoms, it's less likely that you have it and more likely that you can get a false positive. Now, the health department does do once monthly a community testing event where we do kind of get all comers. And that has less to do with the individuals and more to do with the community. Because if we do a big testing event and we get almost no positives, we feel good about that. We do a big testing event and over half of them are positive, we don't feel so good about that, and we need to figure out why that's happening, if it's a particular community or what's going on there. But yeah, I agree. It's much better for symptomatic people.
That's the problem. The asymptomatic is not defined.
Are we going to talk about tests all night? I don't mean that negatively. Are we going to go on and get into this stuff and then get the board talking?
Any other questions for the health experts before we move on to the rest of our information? All right, Dr. Wimble.
Thank you, sir. So I will move on to Readiness Indicator 3. This is our stakeholder survey data. Board members, you received, as I said before, the detailed reports from each of the 3 surveys. And I'm going to share some slides, but I'm going to go through them rather quickly in the interest of time. The first is about our student survey. We were very proud to see that 2,159 of our students in grades 3 through 12 answered this survey. And we think it's valuable information that we hear their voices in this conversation. So the first question was, how would you like to be learning right now? And the 2 bars that you see here, the first says, wish I could spend more time learning at school, outweighed, I like learning at home, 2-to-1. So we did have some children that kind of enjoyed the status quo. 2-to-1, almost, wish they could spend more time learning at school. How happy are you with the amount of time you spend speaking with your teacher? Extremely happy on the top, extremely unhappy on the bottom. So we were glad to see that it was more weighted towards the positive experience there for that question. The next one, how difficult or easy is it to use the distance learning technology, computers, video calls, virtual classrooms, etc.? Extremely easy on the top, extremely difficult on the bottom. And you see here, it's kind of a mixed bag. You've got a pretty even spread across those two. There are a lot of students that find it either slightly or extremely difficult to navigate the technology. How sure are you that you can do well in school right now? Again, at the top, not at all sure, and at the bottom, extremely sure. And again, kind of a more or less even bell curve on that. How difficult or easy is it to stay focused on schoolwork right now? Extremely easy at the top and extremely difficult at the bottom. Again, just a bell curve, straight up. How connected do you feel to the adults at your school right now? Not at all connected or extremely connected? The majority right in the middle again. How connected do you feel to other students at your school right now? Whoops. Not at all connected and extremely connected. This one you see a big skew. Children are definitely not feeling very connected with their peers as a whole. This was an open-ended question. What do you like about school right now? And this is what's called a word cloud. The largest and most bolded words are the ones that appeared the most in the survey. There were thousands of responses, so I obviously don't have time or ability to go through that right now, but you can just kind of see some of the themes that bubbled up to the top there about what they like about school right now. Nothing is pretty big, isn't it? Unfortunately. Although I see teacher is really big up there too. So they're loving their teachers, that's for sure. What do you not like about school right now? Hard work. I see Zoom in there. So again, board members, you have the opportunity to go through all of these responses individually. They were included in the reports. So we'll switch over now to our parent survey. We had almost 2,200 responses there. That started off with the question, how satisfied are you with the way learning is structured at your child's school right now? Not at all satisfied at the top and extremely satisfied at the bottom. Surprisingly, a bit of an even curve on that, a little bit perhaps weighted towards the satisfaction side. Do you think your child should spend more time in person at school right now? Looks like just under 1,000 saying yes, and around 875 saying no. How difficult or easy is it for your child to use the distance learning tools? Again, the same question was asked of children. Very difficult at the top and slightly easy at the bottom. How confident are you in your ability to support your child's education during distance learning? Not at all confident and extremely confident. Again, kind of full spectrum there, all the way across the board. How concerned are you about your child's academic growth right now? Not at all concerned at the top, extremely concerned at the bottom. How concerned are you about your child's social, emotional well-being right now? Not at all concerned, and then at the bottom, extremely concerned. How concerned are you about your child's behavior right now? Not at all concerned at the top, and extremely concerned at the bottom. So apparently not a lot of behavior problems at the house. How concerned are you about your child's physical health right now? Not at all concerned at the top, extremely concerned at the bottom. How concerned are you about your child's peer relationships right now? Not at all concerned at the top and extremely concerned at the bottom. How helpful has the communication from your child's school been this school year? Not at all helpful at the top and extremely helpful at the bottom. We're happy to see this is trending more towards it being helpful for our parents. How satisfied are you with the frequency of communication from your child's school? I wish they communicated more frequently. I wish they communicated less frequently. And I am happy with the frequency of communication. Again, an open-ended question with a word cloud. What else do you want to share about your child's needs right now? Again, not terribly informative, but I know board members, you did have access to all of the individual comments, and they really span the gamut. Finally, this is our educator survey. We asked all of our employees, for those that had direct instruction with children in our school system, to answer this survey. We had 513 responses. First question was, how satisfied are you with the current learning model? Not at all satisfied at the top, extremely satisfied at the bottom. Do you think educators should spend less or more time in person at school right now? About 170 said less time, about 90 said more time, and about 200 said about the same amount of time. Have your students encountered any obstacles with technology? Overwhelmingly, they're answering yes. Smaller percentage say no, and even smaller say I don't know. In the past week, how many of your students regularly participated in your virtual classes? At the top, we have almost no students, very small number. And then at the bottom, the other range, almost all students. In the past week, how engaged have your students been in your virtual classes? Not at all engaged at the top, extremely engaged at the bottom. And again, an open-ended question, what obstacles have your students encountered with technology? And we see again that internet popping up, access, be able to get online. So that concludes all of our stakeholder survey data. We now have our Readiness Indicator 4, which is the topic of emerging research. And I believe we've talked about that to some degree already, but I'll turn it over to Dr. McLean and again our experts if they'd like to just sort of maybe touch on that. I do feel like we've covered that to some degree. But this is a component that's helping inform our decision. Dr. McLean?
Absolutely. The emerging research is where we are part of the study with Duke University and UNC. So we hope to learn more here about what is going on across the state of North Carolina as it relates to children and decisions in districts. They won't tell us what to do, but we certainly can learn what is going on. The hope is that we'll even learn what's going on right down to the classroom level. So I'm excited about the science behind what we hear, and we understand they are excited about working with us, with our local health department. Is there anything you ladies would like to add here about emerging research?
I will just add that as Granville Vance Public Health is an academic rural health department, so we consistently connect with what's going on at Duke, at UNC, and at North Carolina Central University, and we have partnered to put on community testing events and to ensure that we're providing training and connection to residents of medicine and nursing in our health department. So we will continue to look at the research and work together with the school system and the university system to find the best answers when the hard questions arise.
Thank you so much. We certainly appreciate you all joining our meeting this evening. You've been most helpful, as always. I don't know how to thank you enough. I look forward to our continued work together. Thank you so much, Dr. Preston. And Ms. Anderson, Ms. Contra, thank you so very much. Dr. Winborn, will you continue to bring this home, please?
Yes, ma'am. So moving forward, I think one of the things that the senior staff has discussed is the need to make a pledge to our stakeholders, all of them out there, that regardless of our decision, we really need to think about providing, at a minimum, a two-week notice, of no less, to our parents, guardians, and educators, so they can help prepare for whatever decisions you as a body decide to make. We think maybe anything under 2 weeks may be unfair to some of our parents and our families who have arrangements in place and are doing the best they can given the circumstances. So here we have Plan B, possible reentry timelines. Okay, again, these would be based on your assessment as board members of the readiness indicators. We are presenting really three scenarios for your consideration tonight. The first column is an immediate return to Plan B. And when we say immediate, that is, of course, taking into account the 2-week window that we propose that we give. The second column is the second 9 weeks that we begin Plan B, which second 9 weeks fall on October 19th. And then the third option would be to begin at the semester mark or at the third 9 weeks. And if you'll notice this first column, we would also do it with a staggered gradual entry with certain populations. So we would start right away with pre-K kindergarten and our self-contained EC, or those students who receive special education services in a separate setting. We would have them come back first for the first 2 weeks, and then we would bring back all of our gradual reentry in grades K-8 in 4 cohorts, as you saw, and then gradually phase that into 2 once everyone learns the ropes. And then our 9-12 would follow as well. And we can hopefully, according to the governor and their guidance, get on towards Plan A. So really, we've set this up as 3 possible points maybe for you guys to discuss and debate the merits about the timeline for returning to Plan B. I would note that we also need to think about the possibility of maybe, if we do go to Plan B, the unfortunate necessity to revert back to Plan C if we had some sort of outbreak, if we had some crisis with staffing or with funding or some other safety concern popped up. We need to kind of have a plan in place in the event that things get bad. What would cause us to go back into Plan C? So I will stop there, and I'll turn it back to this slide for everyone to take a look at and discuss. Thank you.
Dr. Winborn, if I'm not mistaken, there will be one word. If you come down in that first column to the third cell, where we have select students, grades 9 through 12, I believe that should just read students, grades 9 through 12. All students, grades 9 through 12, not select.
So, Mr. Chair, are we going to, is this time to talk about?
Yeah, what I'd like to do to kind of keep this orderly and keep everybody kind of an opportunity, we'll go around the table, ask if you have questions, comments. When we get to the end, we'll kind of tie up our deliberation and go from there. So Dr. Holohan, if you're ready to start.
I feel that we should move into this, and I would suggest that we do that based on the first column, which is immediate. And the reason I say that is because, number one, the data looks much better. I feel much more comfortable. Number two, that we have had school systems all over the state, mostly out west, who have done this, and overall, it's gone pretty well. And number three, I have 2 grandkids in the school system where this is being done, and they love it.
Anything else?
I believe that's enough.
Mr. Yu, questions or comments?
Don't have any questions, but I agree with Dr. Holohan that when we go back into this, we do it immediately. And I was just looking here at the pre-K and SEP the same. I guess that's the the kids with special needs, they're the ones that go back first. And then the other K through 8 is regular students.
Yes, sir. Our exceptional children self-contained. Yes,
I've
sir.
lost my record. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was reading that correctly.
Yes, sir.
But I feel like it's time for us to go back to meeting.
Mr. Hughes, question or comments?
You have a question. Self-contained EC is for everybody from PK through high school, 12th grade?
Yes, sir. The self-contained children will be pre-K through high school self-contained. Is that correct, Dr. Miley?
So those would be students who are in separate special education programs of all ages, the small separate programs.
And this can happen the 28th, that's immediate, it would be.
It can, yes, sir.
Okay, that's all I have.
Dr. McKnight?
Positive case for Granville County now? She said it was like 5.
Right now, I believe it's come down to 5. Is that right?
No.
It has come down to 5.
I'll continue to look at some of the metrics here.
Mr. Rivers, questions or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I spent hours going over all this stuff, and I was really planning here to really try and lobby to open our schools. It looks like we've got 1, 2, 3 votes right now that I can count. I believe it's all, that's 4. So I don't think there's any necessity for me to go over this. I do feel, and I'm not trying to impose my feelings on anyone else, I do feel that we can do this safely. The question Dr. Wilkins about the testing, which was so important, is one of the markers was getting less than 10 per 100,000. We'll never get there if we test asymptomatic people. We'll never get there. So that was the reason for that question. I think the important thing is we're seeing a trend down of our total active cases in the county. And I spent a long time this afternoon trying to find out any evidence anywhere in the world where a student had passed COVID to a teacher, and I cannot find it. The last report I found officially was in July, and it said no. So clearly, the risk to teachers and students is not high. The fact that the only people being allowed in our schools would be the students, which are not going to like to pass COVID to a teacher, and no one else, and the teachers are already there working with each other, I think this provides no increased risk to our teachers. And once again, I'm fully prepared at age 68 on day 1 of Plan B to do whatever I can to volunteer and help in any way, in any capacity. I would never ask a teacher to do anything that I was not willing to do myself.
Ms. Lynn, question or comments?
I just wanted to say that the surveys were very helpful to me. I understand that the goal is to get the kids back as safely as possible, but just knowing how the students feel and how the parents feel about sending their kids back to school was a very eye-opening thing for me. So I agree they need to go back, and they need to go back as soon as possible.
I have a question. Dr. Meyer, Dr. McLean, I'm not sure which one can answer this. Explain to me, so one of the things I'm hearing over and over from our teachers is the fact of trying to do what they're doing right now and just not succeed because they're spending 12, 13, 14 hours a day trying to do this. So can someone explain to me what we're putting in place for teachers to teach face-to-face as well as helping students remotely? What is the expectation? What are we expecting our teachers to do?
So we are looking at it, it's sort of like a flipped classroom model. There's one method that teachers can use, which would be the teachers could pre-record lessons and then have those lessons available and then be available for questions from their students while they're in class. The other method would be, for example, if the teacher is teaching in Group A, the students in Group A, the students that are at home during the day on Group A can learn along with the students that are in front of the teacher, which when the teacher is teaching that group that are in front of them for Group A, and then for Group B, it could be the same method. So the students will have the option of logging in to a live lesson on, say, Group A day on Monday or Group B day on Thursday. That's just an example of how it can be done. But either way, the teachers for the most part will be teaching two sets of students, the students that are in front of them and the students that are at home. And the students that are at home learning virtually, some of that learning could also be asynchronously, meaning that it would not be a live lesson while the teacher is teaching, but maybe watching a video that the teacher has posted or watching a class that has already happened by going to that teacher's webpage or learning management system where they're learning from.
So if we go to the staggered entry where there are cohorts, is it looking like a teacher will see Group A1 every 7 days? Is that how that works?
Every 5 school days, I believe. You look at it that way. So they would show up on, yes, every 4 days, but every 5 school days. For example, students in Group A1 will go to school on Monday, and then they will be remote learning the rest of that week, and then return back to school the following Monday.
I guess one of the concerns I have, obviously, I have said publicly, and I'm not just saying it to say it, but I want our kids back face to face. I'm not sure how we can do this with our resources. I'm not sure how we operate with not having substitutes, how we're asking teachers to do more, and how we are running bus service and not having bus monitors and all these other things we've talked about. That's just kind of where I'm missing something. Are there
I would think that a teacher would actually not be as strung out doing this as opposed to the virtual stuff. You know, somebody mentioned earlier, they take phone calls or, whatever at 8:30 at night, so on and so forth. And to me, if you have a teacher who's teaching that lesson, and she can then work with other students.
Can you talk in your
Oh, yeah, excuse me. It seems to me that a teacher who will be teaching X lesson to be able to share that with her other students, as opposed to, I don't know how much face-to-face there is on the virtual, but my point is, I think it would be more efficient. In my mind, now I may be wrong, but in my mind, it would be much more efficient, and I think qualitatively, with being up there in front of the class and all that stuff. To me, it would just be, if I were a teacher, I probably would feel a lot better doing that than virtual stuff.
I have a question of clarification.
Yes, sir.
When we originally talked about going back in staggering, the group A1 and A2, I thought we were just going to do for about 2 weeks to get them used to the new ways of doing it, and then both age groups would be put together on the 3rd week. So they would actually be going that Monday and Tuesday, then remote Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Is that correct, or is that not correct?
Yes and no. Yes, if all the metrics and all the readiness indicators stay the same and say this is a great idea, then 2 weeks will be sufficient. But let's say something occurs and we need to pivot and stay in that state a little longer, then we can. So for now, if everything stays put and all we need happens to be 2 weeks, great. Then I'll be able to email you and say we're ready to rock and roll next week with the full Plan B. Let's go. Transportation is ready, child nutrition is ready. The students have been properly trained with this new way of going and everything is ready. But let's say the indicators switch gears on us in the community. Then I'm going to need to email you to say, it's been recommended we do something a little different. We stay here for a little bit longer because of this or because of that. So it's a yes and a no. The plan is to do this for about 2 weeks, but it's a safe space to stay in if we need.
Okay, well, that's what I just needed a clarification on that.
Yes, sir.
Because it wasn't exactly presented that way in our small meetings.
Yes, sir.
So I was thinking this was like 2 weeks and then next week.
You know what, I'm glad you mentioned that, Mr. Reed, because I neglected to share with you a question we received answers to. This is in your folder tonight, board members, just in case you wanted to sort of know numbers, rough numbers of how many youngsters would be in each building for the full remote and for staggered. So you can see small amounts of children in the building at a time, which personally, once we broke it down this way, it gave a little more comfort about the numbers. So this is in your folder this evening.
And the other question I had after I read that, because I was just looking at that, is those that are virtual that choose to come back, will they be coming back at the times that we have set here, or they have to go to the 9 weeks?
They will have an opportunity at the semester mark.
Semester mark.
Yes, sir. At the semester mark, we will actually reach out to all parents to see if this is how they would like to continue learning for second semester. We'll do that at the semester mark.
I was just wondering when they would be contacted.
Great question. Thank you for that.
Dr. McLean, is there any concern about transitioning in the middle of the quarter?
Absolutely.
Like, how is that going to, that's what I'm wondering. I'm looking at the timeline of September 28th, and I think the second quarter starts October 19th.
That's always a concern. That is one of the concerns with us starting. Luckily, we're starting with pre-K, kindergarten, and our self-contained exceptional children only on September 28th. And then on October 12th, which is only, is that 1 week before the end of the second 9 weeks? That is a concern. We might want to look at that, Dr. McKnight, and change that October 12th date to the end of the second 9 weeks, because you're right, that for teachers to do that for just 1 week is going to be extremely challenging from an educator standpoint. But we may want to leave it alone because it will give us practice. Remember that staggered is for 1 day a week before we move to the 2 days a week. Either way, whenever you do it, it is going to be a concern. It is going to be different. It is going to be challenging. And I don't know that there is any good time to do that. I'm going to be honest. But Dr. Houlihan made a very good point. I've been in constant contact with several of our districts on Plan B in the CC RESA and other colleagues of mine across the state. There are some, now I don't know if I put the word, there's some magic words out there that I seem to get about doing it just great. And what I'll tell you, everyone says is get ready, because there are challenges with this. What everyone is doing is the very best they can to try to do it as best they can. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'm going to ask you all to be patient with us as we embark upon this journey. There are going to be some new ways of doing things, and I'm just hoping everyone is just that. They're patient with us as we embark upon this new path. We're going to be cautious. We're going to have to be. We know there will be some mistakes, but we are going to certainly don't charge it to our hearts. It will truly not be an error from the heart. We're going to try to make certain everyone is trained so that when youngsters are getting out of the vehicles and getting off of those school buses, They are all properly screened, and once we get them in the schoolhouses, there is no such thing as people coming to bring things and so forth and so on. And all of the things I love to do, like visitors coming in, moms and dads bringing things, that will be different. For the very first time in our district, we can't have any of that. Once we are in session this time, we're going to have to be careful. And so lots of things will be a little different this go around. And those are best practices we're learning from the districts who are doing it well, and they're able to stay in. Is because once children are screened and everyone seems to be in safe quarters, you want to keep it that way. So we have a nice long laundry list of things. Now that it seems like I guess we have to take a formal vote in just a little bit, but it looks like the direction we're going. We will then talk with you about some of the things that will be different, and we're just hoping to have full community support and graciousness and patience and kindness with how different this will be.
Board members, are there other questions or comments before we entertain a motion?
Why do we have to entertain a motion? Because we'd already given Dr. McLean the authority to make this decision. You have a consensus. So why do we have to make a motion on this one?
Well, I think she's wanting us to make the decision, and I don't know that we actually have a consensus. So I think a formal vote is in order for this.
I was just saying that motion was made in August and passed. So I was just wondering how we had to make another one.
I move that we open our schools beginning immediately with our staggered plan and go to Plan B.
All right, so we have a motion by Mr. Rivers and a second by, is that Dr. Williams? All right, any further discussion? All right, if you're ready to vote, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? No? No. All right, so that carries with 5-2 vote. As Dr. McLean said, this is an order of grace, so we need to be prepared to back the staff up and the teachers as they move forward on this. And Dr. McLean will keep us updated on that.
Absolutely. We will prepare for September 28th with our pre-K, kindergarten, and our isolation.
Madam Clerk, did you get what you needed for that vote? Okay. All right. Thank you so much. We're going to move on now to finance. I believe Dr. Wilborn has an update on an exterior sign for South Granville. Is that correct, Madam Superintendent?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members, I've sent you some email correspondence about this topic previously. I won't spend too much time. I did have a conversation with one of the Creedmoor City Commissioners, and the permit that I submitted for the construction of a new lighted kind of LED display sign in front of the school was tabled by the city commissioners. And they gave some feedback about how the design of the sign did not meet the ordinance for signs. And so they have asked that we go back and look at a new design of this sign, and then they will pay for the cost of a new permit, and that will go to them. And just as a point of clarification, the reason this was never brought to you was because it was still in the planning process. Typically, I would not bring this type of capital outlay project to you guys anyway, but certainly not before we received any permits for it. So it sounds like that we're moving towards a resolution and that we can hopefully get a sign built in front of the school before too long. So I will continue to keep you updated.
Any questions for Dr. Wilborn concerning that? Thank you, Dr. Wilborn.
Yes, sir.
All right. Next, Madam Superintendent, I believe a financial COVID-19 update from Ms. Day.
Yes, House Bill 1105, Coronavirus Relief Act 3.01 was signed into law on Friday, September 4th. Ms. Day has an update for you this evening.
Thank you, Dr. McLean, board members, good evening. It's a quick update, but we've already mentioned briefly House Bill 1105 this evening, but I just want to show you what is included in that bill. The first slide is the statewide allocations. Again, this is statewide. This is not Granville County's portion, but the statewide allocation. The first bullet, it does include additional funding for improving internet connectivity, which is a good thing given the report we had for technology this evening. So we'll be getting some additional money for those Wi-Fi devices. The second bullet is additional funding for PPE. And the third bullet is additional funding for EC student services. Those are the additional funding pieces. Then the next slide includes some of the other adjustments, which the first thing is what Attorney Davidson mentioned earlier, eliminates the requirement for DPI to adjust initial allotments for the actual best 1 of 2 ADM. It does say that allocation transfers for new and growing charter schools will be made. So therefore the result for LEAs would be the initial allotments less the charter school transfers. So we will, for new and growing charter schools, we will be reduced, is what the state is telling us. And we're anticipating that. Just a couple of things I want to say about that is that this is held harmless for state. So any students that are attending a charter school, it's no held harmless for that. You know, that local money still follows those students. As well as Ms. Attorney Davidson mentioned earlier, it's a delay. You know, it will most likely hit us next year if we don't have that kind of funding this year. The other portion of that is, it was determined in our budget that we had based our budget on receiving that reduction. So it's good news that we will not receive that. However, our low funding is lower than anticipated. So it really is sort of a wash in our budget. That's a good thing that it's a wash, but it's not a windfall, I guess I would say, for this year. The next bullet about that was mentioned earlier, the 2 virtual schools, increasing students by 3,800 students. And I've heard mixed reviews from the state about how they're going to handle that. I hope that we will not see a reduction for that, but I have heard that they're trying to figure it out and they don't know where they're going to get the money for that without taking it somehow from LEAs. The third bullet requires principal salaries to be determined based on the 1920 ADM for principal pay, so it's not reflected on this current year's ADM. Starting January 1st, because the way principal's pay works now, there's an adjustment made in January of their pay. And then the last bullet, temporary flexibility for transportation allocation. It allows us to use, we talked about being able to use the yellow buses for other purposes, but now this allows us to use transportation funding for these specific purposes that are mentioned. Gives us the flexibility to use it for these school nutrition, child care, sanitizing schools and buses, in-person instruction, and remote instruction during the COVID-19 pandemic. So it gives us a little more flexibility with that state transportation funding. And then you've got a link to the full bill if you're interested in looking at that. I'll be glad to take any questions.
Yeah, I have one. The 38 kids that want to do the virtual charter, I understand the state is paying for that. Are we still having to pay the local portion?
Yes. Any students that attend charter schools, the pass-through happens on a real-time basis. We get a bill for that month, and those funds are transferred. So, yes.
And that's for the kids that want to do the virtual charter, right?
Correct. Correct. Yeah, and it's a question, I mean, and what I've heard from DPI is there's a question mark about the state part, whether that is going to affect our funding or not.
Do you know how many from Granville counties go?
I do know, I can get you that number of how many are currently going. I don't know how many since they are lifting the cap, how many additional students.
That's what, yeah, okay, that's what I was asking.
Yeah.
Board members, any further questions? All right, thank you, Ms. Day. All right, Madam Superintendent, we move into our conversation for school reorganization.
Mr. Chair, I believe you have some information here this evening about some action concerning a motion on the floor.
All right, so it's been brought to us concerning the current way the motion was worded for the current study that's on the floor concerning a Southern Elementary School in G.C. Hall. It has been recommended that we could break this into two separate issues. And so essentially the action that is being recommended is to rescind the previous study motion and to break it into two parts. The first one being that we authorize staff to create a report for a formal study to close a particular Southern Elementary School, and then a second motion to authorize staff to create a report for a formal study to determine a course of action to renovate G.C. Hawley Middle School. We've had several conversations about this, and we have given you information you requested up to this point. And so at this point, we kind of want to have some discussion about that, and then we would entertain a motion on if you are willing to make those changes. So I figure let's do it the same way we did with the reentry. If we want to go around the table, you have questions or comments regarding this, and then we'll come back for action. We'll start on this side with Ms. Oliver.
Are you asking for questions about whether or not to break it into two separate motions?
Yeah, so essentially right now, we need to break it into break it into two motions, and then we would decide if there's a particular school we're looking at?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So yes. Okay. Mr. Rivers?
I have no questions.
Dr. McKnight?
No question.
Mr. Peace?
No, I don't have no questions. I'll bring it in. Except for
Mr. Lee?
No question.
Dr. Houlihan?
One question. When we talked about a Southern school, or did we talk about a Southern school?
So I believe we asked staff to come back with a recommendation for two schools that we looked at, and then tonight, if it's the pleasure of the board, we would narrow that down to one for them to study. All right, if there's no further questions, then we'll entertain a motion on the floor. Again, what we're looking for, unless you want to change this, is we would rescind the previous study motion, and then we would break this into the two motions you see there on your agenda. Is anyone willing to?
Actually, you need three motions. One to rescind.
One to rescind, and then...
Okay, I'll make that motion first.
All right, so we have a motion to rescind the previous study motion by Mr. Peace, a second by Dr. McKnight. Is there further discussion on that? All right, if you're ready to vote, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right, so we've officially rescinded that study motion, and then the next would be to break it into two motions. And if someone is willing to make that first motion, what exactly are you? All right, so help me out here. Are we making the motion now that we need to identify an elementary school?
Well, I think what the staff was requesting was that someone, if you want them to study.
Break it into motions.
Right, that if you want to separate the Hawley issue, if you want them to study further, someone has to study
The next
So
step.
that's what they're requesting, obviously, this board would make a change. And then address policy.
So, I move that we authorize the staff to create a report for a formal study to determine the course of action to renovate GC Hall.
We have a motion on the floor to instruct the staff to create a formal study to determine the steps to renovate Hawley Middle School. Motion by Dr. McKnight. Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have discussion or questions? All right, seeing none, if you're ready to vote, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, so now I think we're to the one that we might need to discuss a little bit, possibly. That was McKnight.
Mr. Richardson,
Yes, sir.
clerk had a question.
That was Mr. Peace second. Sorry about that. All right, and so now moving into the second part of this motion, we are looking to instruct the staff to formally study to close a particular southern area elementary school. Do you have debate or discussion about that at this point?
So we're not looking at 2 schools now, we're having to make a decision on 1.
So that's the pleasure of the board. What we previously asked the staff to do was to bring 2 schools, which they did to you previously. And those 2 schools that we looked at was Creedmoor and Wilkins.
Was that the vision I missed when I was in the hospital?
I believe it was.
I believe so, yes, sir. Mr. Reeves?
Regarding discussion, I think it's just important to emphasize for the public that if we do vote on this motion to do a study, it's simply a study. There's other processes, as you mentioned earlier, public hearings and other opportunities. So a study in itself is not necessarily indicating one way or the other.
Yes, sir, absolutely. That's a very good point. Thank you. All right. Other discussion?
So let's go back just a minute.
Yes, sir.
Because Mr. Udy raised a good point. We talked about at some point Wilton and Creedmoor. Okay? Then tonight, based on what we approved, we're going to choose 1 school for a study or both of them.
So the thought and the recommendation from the staff is for you to narrow it down to 1 school so that they are concentrating on 1 school for their efforts versus trying to produce 2 dual reports.
Well, frankly, as important as this is, if we need to do 2 studies, we need to do 2 studies. And I just don't think we should take we should do this as well as we can. We need to look at the options of both schools. I mean, that's just, others may not feel that way, but I just think it's kind of, we talked about 2 schools and now boom, all of a sudden we're going to pick 1 when we really haven't looked at any information.
I agree with you to do 2. I do would like to clarify it wasn't just boom. We had talked about this.
I know. Excuse me, I didn't mean it. Excuse me. Master Chair, excuse me. You'll not get that again.
All right, other comments?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
The studies that you're talking about, can you, Attorney, can you elaborate on what that entails? If we decide to do 2, I think that was basically what we're talking about. I know there's a process that we have to go through in order to close the school. I don't know what the process we have to go through to study the school. Am I right?
So the process for closing the school starts with a study. The process for closing a school starts with a study. The board directs a study of the impact, and I'm looking here for the statute. There is
A copy is going around right now, Ms. Dudison.
Okay, great. There is a list of factors that have to be included in that study. Others certainly can be included. impact on students, I know is one factor. And so the idea is the staff compiles a study of whatever information the board needs to make a decision. That information comes to the board. Then there is a public hearing where the board receives information from the public. And then, only after doing both of those things can the board make a decision.
So if you recall, when we looked at Joe Toller and Mary Potter, I'm assuming Dr. Winborn, the study would look similar to those?
Yes, sir. Virtually the same template, just with information specific for that school. That was consistent with the requirements of the statute.
Other questions or comments?
It was my recollection that in our small group meetings that the staff briefed us on preliminary studies of the two schools in question. And it was my recollection that at our small group meeting that we decided on which school to proceed with. Is that what your recollection is? Because you were at that meeting.
I don't think it was decided because we weren't able to decide.
Right, it was just we were leaning towards, but we were given information on both schools.
I think there were pros and cons that have been discussed a couple of different times. Yes, sir.
That was my recollection, and then we honed in on two of them and discussed with the staff.
Board members were given communications on all schools as requested at the retreat for consideration. So tonight, you should be able to think about what you saw and go from there. Do you have that information, Dr. Winborn?
Yes, ma'am. This is the same handout that you've already received twice.
Why
Just
would
with
you
general information about all of the Southern Area elementary schools.
Let's supply that information to board members just as a refresher, please. I'd like them to have that plan. That would be important to have. Maybe we'll get this uploaded for the record as well.
So board members, if you look on the back of the first page, you see highlights of each of our Southern elementary schools and the information that either you requested or it was brought to you previously.
Mr. Chair, at the risk of being too wordy tonight, if you look at this, and we've had this information before, but that doesn't tell us anything but numbers. I mean, if the study includes a number of other things as well, does it not?
Yes, sir. This is simply what you had directed me to provide to you at the retreat.
That's fine.
That's all.
So tonight, if you were to either come back to the staff and say you want both schools studied or one school study, that study, if you remember correctly, was several pages long that would give you in-depth information about the history, the financials, the academic performance, attendance lines, where those kids would go if the schools closed. It would have all that information in it, however you direct the staff to do it.
Mr. Chair.
Hold on one second, Mr. Please. Ms. Howard?
How much is a study for just one school versus two schools as far as?
So it's staff time is what it is. It's not, am I correct, it's not a direct outside cost?
That's
It's the staff
correct.
time.
That's correct. It's Dr. Winborn, Dr. Mark, Ms. Day, and myself.
Unless you request architectural or other services.
When we originally
right.
went back and when there was some conversation of moving a middle school, there was a cost associated because we had drawings, those kind of things. Mr. Peace?
Yes, sir. If we can do this study in-house, I would, well, I guess I can make a motion that we study the two schools that we talked about, which would be Creedmoor and Wilson.
Okay. Would you like to make that in the form of a motion?
I just did.
Okay.
Sir?
I can tell everyone's getting a little antsy. You go from not talking to being mean to you. All right, so we have a motion on the floor by Mr. Peace. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Second by Dr. Houlihan. So let me make sure that we have that motion correct, that we are directing the staff to create a report from a formal study that would look at closing Creedmoor Elementary and Wilton Elementary separately and bring that study back to the board for consideration. That was made by Mr. Peace and it was seconded by Dr. Houlihan. Is there any further discussion?
How soon can we get it done?
I believe the original, what we had asked the staff to do was to provide that report at our next board meeting, which would be October 5th.
Okay.
Is that still doable for the staff, Dr. McCoy?
That was fun. And in there, we're trying to get Plan B.
And you have school improvement plans for
And school improvement plans.
Are we looking at a November date?
Well, we have October 19th.
Sir?
We have a meeting October 19th.
Yeah, I believe right now that it's developed for school improvement plans to be brought to us.
And in addition, that's my
That October.
18th birthday.
When you look at your calendars, the October work session, is that doable?
Wasn't the goal to get this done before December?
It was, and when we established the timeline, it was taken into consideration in one school this month.
It was. At that time, we did not take into consideration opening, getting Plan B. Time, because it's the same for
If we were able to present that at that October work session, the board would ask for any more information. Can we present the final report in November, then have a public meeting like the one?
Team, is that doable?
When would the final, assuming we were shifting the timeline, when would the final vote take
So I would
place?
almost say that we would probably need to schedule a third meeting before we see the board
We may have to have a special call meeting.
in November. So in November, if we are to do this with two schools, what it looks like is the possibility of you receiving the initial report mid-October. You would ask for any additional information from that report. You would get that final report at the November 2nd board meeting. We would schedule a public hearing at that point for one school. Whatever school you determine at that November date would be a public hearing. And we would schedule a third meeting in November to actually take action if you so chose. Because our attempt was to have this done before the new board was seated. Because the thought would be is that the new board, we would essentially almost have to start over with the new board. If the staff is willing to put in that time to do that, are you as board members willing to put in what it's going to take to make that happen?
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Is the problem, Dr. McLean, that we're asking for two studies as opposed to one study? Is that what's making this not available for October 5th or October 2nd?
It's one of them. And the new variable, what else has to be done between now and then?
Okay, so the fact that we're asking for two is not a bearing on us being able to get it for the October board meeting.
And part of it is the components of a study. They're quite in-depth. They're quite in-depth. And they should be. You know, as we've said before, this isn't just a little report. We should be quite in-depth. We should be taken extremely seriously. This is something that should be given a a great deal of attention. So the research that will go into this, it's detailed, but it's the same people that are already running. There are 4 departments with about 5 titles behind their names. So they're doing this in addition to.
So 1 or 2 doesn't make it still can meet effort regardless of whether it's 1 school or 2
No,
schools.
2 makes a tremendous difference. It's huge. So, but it's something that frankly I think that we probably need to do. I need your patience.
I guess, I felt like at our meetings that we had, as a result of the retreat, that we discussed this pretty thoroughly and had narrowed it down to 1 at that point. If this is causing a problem with you and your staff because of all the other things going on, is that something that we need to discuss more? I agree with you. There's certainly an advantage doing 2 studies, but I kind of thought we had come out of those small work sessions with the plan, which was...
I certainly would never see it causing a problem. I think it's far too serious, and I think anything we can do to make certain that this board makes the right decision is what we need to do.
Good. I just was offering that for you. Thank you.
So to remind you, the motion we have on the floor at the moment is that we are instructing the staff to perform a study of Creamer Elementary and Wilton Elementary. We have revised our timetable with input from the staff. And so are there other questions before we vote?
Just a clarifying question, I guess. We are not asking the staff for a recommendation. We are asking for a study. The board will make a decision
That is
based on before we get it.
That is correct, yes, sir. What has been the position of this board is that the staff does not make that recommendation.
I just want the staff to understand that that's our responsibility to make that recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes.
All right. Staff, are we clear on what's being asked for at the moment?
May I ask just a point of clarification?
Yes, sir.
I recall when we were drafting the studies for Toller and for Mary Potter, when we brought our first draft of the report, board members had some really good feedback and asked us to go back again and add other things that were not included. Maybe there might be the possibility that we could bring you our work in progress draft at the October 5th for you to just preview. Would that be helpful? I mean, knowing that it may not be complete and polished, and then we could, you could say, oh, you're missing this, we want that, add this, please. And then maybe, what was the date? On the 19th, we would have a more polished report to bring you. That may be helpful for us.
That made a big difference the last time, if I recall.
And I think the more times that we can do that, where it's putting you less at pressure, we'll be probably better off.
It also ended up being the document you all wanted to see in the end. And that's our whole goal of this. We want you to have what you need to make a good decision.
Okay. Any other comments or questions before we vote? All right, if you're ready to vote, all those in favor, the motion again is to authorize the staff to do studies of Wilton, Creamer Elementary, to bring those back to us. First pass at our October board meeting, and then at the October work session, we'll have another draft of it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right. Carry 7-0. Staff, we appreciate the extra work that you're going to put into that. Thank you so much. All right, it is now 9:28. We have reached the point where we need to go into closed session. And so I would entertain a motion that we adjourn into closed session. Someone willing to make that motion?
So
Okay, Mr. Eby?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the closed session in accordance with North Carolina General Statute 143, 318, 11A6, 143, 318, 11A3, 140,
All right, so Mr. Shue, you made that motion. Mr. Peace, will you second that? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, all right, we're back in open session now. All right, I would like to entertain a motion that we approve the certified personnel as presented. Do we have someone willing to make that motion?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Peace. Do we have a second? All right, second by Dr. McKnight. Is there any further discussion? You ready to vote? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve classified personnel as presented. Would like someone to entertain that motion? We have a motion by Dr. McKnight. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Peace. Is there any further discussion? Ready to vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Do we have other topics that need to come before the board?
Yes, I was just wondering about an update on the sale of Educaiton School. If we could get the status on
Yes, I actually had some correspondence with our real estate agent, and there was a potential buyer that flew up from Florida over the weekend. Apparently has ties to the area, and Ms. Hancock considered her a very good potential buyer. So the interest continues. This is in addition to the other local group that had seen the property a week ago.
Thank you, Dr. Weaver. Is there other items that need to come before the board? All right, seeing none, then I want to remind you that our next work session is scheduled for Monday, September 28th. That'll be at 4 o'clock at GC Hawley. The purpose of that work session will begin some of the work regarding the renovation proposal for Hawley. You had requested a work session to have time to discuss that, and so we will be at GC Hawley at 4 o'clock. October 5th is our regular board meeting at 6 o'clock. We will update you where that location will be if that changes from central office. And if there is nothing else, Madam Superintendent, anything from you?
No, sir, nothing else this evening.
All right, I want to thank everybody for their patience tonight. We got through quite a bit of work tonight, a lot of hard topics. And as we have kind of said, now that we have set the course, I would like for you to get behind our staff and as they plot that course to direct. And again, the word of the day is grace, so just remember that. And so if there's nothing else, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn. Okay. Do we have a second? Second. All right, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?